They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but mine came with a side of champagne and a contract written in blood. My name is Alyssa Price, and on what should have been the happiest night of my life, I became a spectacle, dumped in front of 200 people by the man I thought I'd marry. But humiliation has a way of breeding courage, and when a stranger in an expensive suit offered me $500,000 and a chance to destroy my ex, I didn't ask questions. I should have. Because the moment I signed that marriage contract with Thomas D'Angelo, I signed away my ordinary life forever. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story travels. The crystal chandeliers of Bellecour cast fractured rainbows across the white tablecloths, each prism of light a small mockery of the fairy tale Alyssa Price had believed she was living. She sat at table 7, the good table, the one near the center of the restaurant where everyone who mattered could see you, wearing the emerald dress Cameron had picked out 3 weeks ago. "It matches your eyes," he'd said, kissing her forehead in that distracted way he'd developed lately, the way that made her feel like an item being checked off a list. "You look nervous," her best friend Rachel whispered from across the table, her dark eyes narrowed with concern. "Are you okay?" Alyssa forced a smile, her fingers trembling as she reached for her water glass. "Just excited. It's been a year since he proposed. I keep thinking maybe tonight he'll finally set a date." Rachel's expression shifted into something Alyssa couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or warning. But before she could respond, the restaurant's lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd of 200 guests, all of Cameron's colleagues, donors, and society friends who had gathered for what he'd called a special anniversary celebration. Cameron Westbrook stood from his seat beside her, tall and golden in his tailored navy suit, every inch the rising political star the newspapers called him. At 32, he'd already secured a position as chief of staff to Senator Morrison, with whispers of his own congressional run in the next election cycle. His smile was perfectly practiced, the same one that had graced the cover of Capital magazine last month. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Cameron began, his voice carrying that practiced timbre of authority that made boardrooms listen. "A year ago, I made what I thought was the most important decision of my life." Alyssa's heart hammered. This was it. He was going to announce their wedding date in front of everyone. She could already imagine the applause, the congratulations, the way her mother would cry happy tears when she called her tomorrow. "But I've learned something crucial this past year," Cameron continued, his eyes scanning the crowd but never quite landing on her. "In politics, in life, we must be willing to make hard choices, to recognize when circumstances change, to have the courage to choose the path that serves the greater good, even when it's painful." The first tendrils of dread began to curl in Alyssa's stomach. "Which is why I've gathered you all here tonight, my friends, my colleagues, my supporters, to be witnesses to honesty, to transparency." He finally looked at her, and Alyssa saw nothing in those blue eyes she'd once thought she'd drown in. Nothing but cold calculation. "Alyssa, you're a wonderful person, kind, talented, creative, but I need a partner who understands the demands of public service, someone who can navigate the complexities of political life. Someone who can stand beside me, not behind me." The room had gone deathly silent. Alyssa could hear her own heartbeat, could feel 200 pairs of eyes turning toward her like searchlights. "I need someone like Victoria." A woman stood from table 3, which Alyssa had specifically arranged for Cameron's college friends, and glided toward the center of the room. She was stunning in a calculated way. Honey blonde hair in a perfect chignon, a red dress that suggested power and sexuality in equal measure, pearls at her throat that probably cost more than Alyssa's car. "Victoria Ashford and I have been working closely together for the past 6 months," Cameron said, and the way he emphasized working closely made the subtext crystal clear. "She's Senator Morrison's senior strategist, Harvard Law, political pedigree that goes back 4 generations. She understands this world in ways that—" He glanced at Alyssa almost apologetically. "In ways that an architect from public school never could." The words landed like physical blows. Alyssa felt her lungs constrict, felt the room tilt slightly on its axis. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Cameron, she whispered, but her voice was lost in the sudden murmur rippling through the crowd. Victoria took Cameron's hand, her smile sympathetic in a way that made Alyssa want to scream. "We didn't plan this," Victoria said, her voice like honey over glass. "Sometimes love just happens. I hope you can understand, Alyssa. No hard feelings?" No hard feelings. Alyssa's mind went blank, then flooded with 1,000 responses, none of which would come out of her mouth. She sat frozen, aware that her humiliation was being witnessed, dissected, and would be discussed over brunch tomorrow at every country club in the city. "I think it's best if we end our engagement cleanly," Cameron continued, and had the audacity to look noble as he said it. "I'm giving you the apartment, of course, and I'll make sure you're financially comfortable during the transition. I'm not a monster, Alyssa. Just unfaithful, just cruel, just a coward who chose to destroy her in front of an audience." "Say something," Rachel hissed beside her, gripping her hand under the table. "Don't let him do this to you." But what was there to say? What words could possibly matter in a moment like this? Alyssa stood, her legs somehow still working despite feeling like water. The emerald dress, his choice, always his choice, suddenly felt like a costume she'd been tricked into wearing for a play she hadn't auditioned for. "Congratulations," she heard herself say, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I hope you're very happy together." The crowd erupted in an awkward smattering of applause, as if Cameron had just delivered a campaign speech rather than publicly eviscerated his fiancée. Alyssa walked toward the exit on autopilot, her vision tunneling, vaguely aware of Rachel scrambling to follow her. She made it 3 steps outside Bellecour before her knees buckled. The October air was sharp, carrying the scent of rain and car exhaust. Alyssa pressed her back against the restaurant's stone facade, gulping air, trying not to vomit on the sidewalk. The engagement ring on her finger, 2 carats, princess cut, the ring Cameron's mother had worn, felt like it was burning her skin. "That was the most spectacular public execution I've seen in years," a voice said from the shadows. "And I've seen quite a few." Alyssa's head snapped up. A man stood near the valet stand, somehow separate from the clusters of people coming and going from the restaurant. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been painted on. His dark hair swept back from a face that managed to be both beautiful and vaguely threatening. His eyes were almost black in the streetlight, fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Excuse me?" she managed. "Cameron Westbrook," the man said, his voice carrying the faint trace of an Italian accent. Ambitious, spineless, and unfortunately for him, extremely predictable. He stepped closer, and Alyssa noticed the way the valet attendants gave him a wide berth. "Thomas D'Angelo, and I have a proposition for you, Miss Price." "I don't know you," Alyssa said, taking a step back. Everything felt surreal, dreamlike. Maybe she'd hit her head. Maybe this entire nightmare was a concussion hallucination. "No, but I know you." "Graduated top of your class from state architecture, worked your way through school waitressing at 3 different restaurants, currently employed at Morrison and Associates. Yes, the same Morrison who employs your ex-fiancé. You design beautiful buildings, Miss Price. You have an eye for structure, for foundation, for seeing what others miss." Rachel burst through the doors behind them, stopping short when she saw Thomas. "Alyssa, who is this?" "Someone who wants to help," Thomas said smoothly, "though perhaps this conversation would be better had somewhere more private. My car is just here." "Absolutely not," Rachel said, stepping between them. "Alyssa, we're leaving. Now." But Alyssa found herself staring at this stranger, this Thomas D'Angelo, who somehow knew far too much about her and radiated danger like cologne. What kind of proposition? Thomas smiled, and it transformed his face into something almost gentle. Almost. The kind that turns humiliation into power. The kind that gives you leverage over the man who just destroyed you in front of 200 people. The kind that comes with $500,000 and the satisfaction of watching Cameron Westbrook's political dreams crumble into dust. "That's insane," Rachel said. "Alyssa, he's clearly insane. We're going." But Alyssa didn't move. $500,000. Financial independence. The ability to quit her job at Morrison and Associates, to never have to see Cameron's smug face in the office kitchen, To not have to move back in with her parents in Ohio, tail between her legs. Another failed dreamer returning home. What would I have to do? She heard herself ask. Thomas's smile widened. Marry me. The world tilted again, but differently this time. Rachel made a choking sound. Okay, definitely insane. Alyssa, we are leaving right now, or I'm calling the police. It would be purely a business arrangement, Thomas continued, as if proposing marriage to strangers outside restaurants was a perfectly normal occurrence. Temporary, 6 months, perhaps a year. I need a wife for professional reasons. You need capital and revenge. We help each other. Then we divorce, quietly, and go our separate ways. Professional reasons, Alyssa repeated. What profession? Exactly. Thomas's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around him. The kind that values discretion, Miss Price. The kind that requires certain appearances to be maintained. The kind that your ex-fiancé would be very interested to know about, or very desperate to avoid knowing about, depending on how one chooses to play such information. Understanding dawned cold and clear. You're a businessman, Thomas interrupted smoothly, with diverse interests and a need for the appearance of domestic stability. This isn't Pretty Woman, Miss Price. I'm not looking for love or companionship or anything so pedestrian. I'm looking for a business partner who can stand at my side at various functions, smile for photographs, and convince certain people that I'm a man who has settled into respectable married life. In exchange, you receive financial compensation, a thorough education in how power actually works in this city, and the tools you'll need to systematically dismantle Cameron Westbrook's future. This is crazy, Rachel said. Alyssa, please, let's just go home. We'll eat ice cream. We'll burn his stuff. We'll key his car like normal people. But Alyssa was thinking about the apartment Cameron had so generously said she could keep. The apartment that was in his name, that she'd have to vacate the moment he decided to move Victoria in. About the student loans she was still paying off. About the way everyone at work would look at her tomorrow, knowing she'd been traded in for a better model. About the way Cameron had smiled as he'd destroyed her, secure in the knowledge that she was too small, too powerless, too irrelevant to fight back. How do I know this isn't some kind of trap? She asked Thomas. How do I know you're not worse than Cameron? You don't, Thomas said simply. But ask yourself this, Miss Price. What do you have to lose that hasn't already been taken from you tonight? The door to Bellecour opened again, spilling light and laughter onto the sidewalk. Alyssa caught a glimpse of Cameron and Victoria, his arm around her waist, accepting congratulations from a cluster of donors. Victoria threw back her head and laughed at something someone said, her hand possessive on Cameron's chest. Something inside Alyssa crystallized into diamond-hard clarity. When would this arrangement start? She asked. Alyssa, no, Rachel pleaded. Tomorrow, Thomas said. I have lawyers who can draft a contract protecting both our interests. Everything above board, legally speaking. You'd keep your own name professionally, of course. The marriage would be registered quietly. And at the end of our agreed-upon term, the divorce would be equally discreet. And the $500,000? Half up front, in an account only you can access. Half upon completion of the contract term, plus a generous monthly stipend for expenses, clothing, personal items, whatever you need to play the part convincingly. It was too much, too fast, too insane. But standing there in the emerald dress, with the ghost of Cameron's public betrayal still echoing in her ears, Alyssa couldn't think of a single reason to say no. I want to see the contract first, she said. I want everything in writing, and I want to know exactly what world I'm stepping into before I agree to anything. Thomas's smile was approving. Smart. I wouldn't expect anything less from someone who graduated top of her class. Shall we say 10 o'clock tomorrow? My office is downtown, Castellano Tower, penthouse level. Come alone. She won't be alone, Rachel said firmly. If she's stupid enough to go through with this, I'm coming with her. Thomas considered this, then nodded. As you wish. Though I should warn you, Miss Chen, Rachel Chen, and I should warn you that if anything happens to her, I have 3 brothers who are Marines and a father who's a federal prosecutor. Noted, Thomas said, seemingly unbothered. He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to Alyssa. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, Thomas D'Angelo, Castellano Enterprises. 10 o'clock, Miss Price. Don't be late. He walked to a black Mercedes that had materialized at the curb as if summoned, driven by someone Alyssa couldn't see through the tinted windows. The car pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the city traffic. "Please tell me you're not actually considering this," Rachel said. Alyssa looked down at the card in her hand, then back at Bellacourt, where the party celebrating her humiliation was still in full swing. "Cameron said I didn't understand how power works in this city. Maybe it's time I learned." From a mobster, because that's clearly what he is, right? This Thomas D'Angelo, the suit, the car, the vague business interests? He practically screamed organized crime. "Maybe," Alyssa admitted, "but he's also offering me a way out, a way to not be the victim everyone pities, a way to fight back." "By marrying a criminal you met 5 minutes ago?" "By making a business deal. It's just a contract, Rachel. I negotiate contracts all the time at work. Not marriage contracts with mobsters." But even as Rachel argued, Alyssa felt a strange calm settling over her. For the first time since Cameron had stood up at that table, she felt like she could breathe. Like maybe, just maybe, she hadn't lost everything tonight. Like maybe she'd gained something instead. "Come with me tomorrow," she said to Rachel. "Help me look over the contract. If it seems dangerous or wrong or too insane, we'll walk away. But at least let me hear him out." Rachel closed her eyes, clearly fighting an internal battle. "You're going to do this whether I come or not, aren't you?" "Probably. God help us both." "Fine, but I'm bringing pepper spray and keeping my phone on record the entire time." They stood there for a moment in the October cold, two women in evening dresses outside a restaurant where fairy tales went to die. Then Rachel pulled Alyssa into a fierce hug. "For what it's worth," she whispered, "Cameron's an idiot, and Victoria Ashford has crazy eyes. They deserve each other." Alyssa laughed, surprising herself. It felt good, that laugh, like maybe her vocal cords still worked, like maybe she could make sounds besides screaming. "Let's get out of here," she said. "I need to burn this dress." "Now you're talking sense. Ice cream first?" "Ice cream first." They walked toward Rachel's car, leaving Bellacourt and its glittering cruelty behind. Alyssa didn't look back. What was the point? Everything she'd thought she wanted was back there in that restaurant, revealed as fool's gold. Tomorrow, she'd walk into Thomas D'Angelo's office and potentially make the biggest mistake of her life. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd make the first smart decision she'd had in years. The card in her purse felt heavy, weighted with possibility and danger in equal measure. Castellano Enterprises. She'd Google it when she got home, though she suspected she wouldn't find much. Men like Thomas D'Angelo, men who operated in shadows and spoke in careful innuendos, didn't leave convenient digital footprints. "You know what the worst part is," Alyssa said as they reached the car, "that he did it in public? That I never saw it coming. 6 months, Rachel. He was cheating on me for 6 months with Victoria, and I never suspected a thing. I thought we were planning a wedding. I thought we were building a life. How could I be so blind?" Rachel unlocked the car, and they slid into the familiar leather seats. "Because you trusted him. Because that's what you do when you love someone. It's not a character flaw, Liz. It's called being a decent human being." "Well, maybe it's time I stopped being so decent." Rachel started the engine, pulling out into traffic. "That's the spirit. Tomorrow, we meet with a mysterious, possibly mobster about a fake marriage contract. Tonight, we eat our body weight in chocolate chip cookie dough and watch terrible revenge movies. I'm thinking Kill Bill." Perfect. But as the city lights blurred past the window, Alyssa found her mind drifting back to Thomas D'Angelo. The way he'd stood in the shadows like he belonged there. The way his eyes had assessed her with the precision of someone used to evaluating assets. The way he'd offered her exactly what she needed at exactly the right moment. Too convenient. Too perfect. Too dangerous. And yet, she pulled out her phone and opened Google, typing Thomas D'Angelo Castellano Enterprise, with trembling fingers. The search yielded almost nothing. A few society page photos from charity galas, Thomas in a tuxedo beside various politicians and businessmen, a mention in a business journal about real estate acquisitions, a carefully maintained Wikipedia page that listed his company's holdings in restaurants, shipping, and various import-export ventures. Nothing definitive. Nothing that screamed crime lord, but nothing that didn't either. She clicked on the image search. Thomas at a cancer research fundraiser, shaking hands with the mayor. Thomas at the opening of a new art gallery, champagne glass in hand. Thomas at a boxing match, sitting ringside, his face carefully neutral as two men tried to kill each other for entertainment. In every photo, he looked like he belonged, like the world bent around him rather than the other way around. Finding anything? Rachel asked, glancing over. Nothing concrete, but also nothing good. So we're walking into a situation tomorrow completely blind. Apparently. Great. Love that for us. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Rachel spoke again. You know I'll support you no matter what, right? Even if this turns out to be the most spectacularly bad decision in the history of bad decisions. I know. But if he tries anything sketchy, I'm calling my dad. Federal prosecutor, remember? Noted. And my brothers. The Marines, yes, you mentioned. Just making sure we're clear on the backup plan. Alyssa smiled despite herself. What would I do without you? Probably marry some politically ambitious asshole who'd dump you in front of 200 people. Oh, wait. They both laughed at that, the kind of slightly hysterical laughter that comes after crying, after shock, after your entire life implodes over appetizers. When they reached Alyssa's apartment, the apartment she'd have to vacate soon, the apartment that had never really been hers, Rachel came inside and they did exactly what they'd promised. Ice cream, bad movies, a ceremonial burning of the emerald dress in the bathtub, which set off the smoke alarm and made them laugh so hard they cried. But later, after Rachel had fallen asleep on the couch, and Alyssa lay alone in her bed staring at the ceiling, the laughter faded. The reality of what she was considering settled over her like a heavy blanket. Marriage. To a stranger. A stranger who almost certainly operated outside the law. A stranger who wanted to use her as some kind of prop in whatever game he was playing. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Sleep well, Miss Price. Tomorrow, we begin. Alyssa stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, How did you get my number? The response came immediately. I know a lot of things, Miss Price. That's why you should work with me, not against me. Sweet dreams. She should have been terrified, should have blocked the number, called the police, told Thomas D'Angelo to go to hell. Instead, she set her alarm for 8 a.m., giving herself enough time to find something appropriate to wear to a meeting that would potentially change the entire trajectory of her life. See you at 10, she typed back. 3 dots appeared, then, I'm looking forward to it. Alyssa set her phone down and closed her eyes, but sleep was a long time coming. When it finally arrived, it brought dreams of crystal chandeliers shattering, of emerald dresses burning, of a man with dark eyes offering his hand to pull her from the wreckage. Whether that hand would save her or drag her into deeper waters remained to be seen. But at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, she'd find out. Because Alyssa Price was done being the woman who got left behind. Done being the supporting character in someone else's story. Done being small and safe and forgettable. If Thomas D'Angelo wanted to teach her how power really worked in this city, then she was going to be the best student he'd ever had. And when she was done learning, Cameron Westbrook was going to regret the day he'd ever underestimated her. The engagement ring still sat on her nightstand where she'd thrown it earlier. In the darkness, it caught the streetlight filtering through the curtains, throwing tiny prisms of light across the ceiling. Beautiful lies, she thought. That's all it had ever been. Tomorrow she'd trade those beautiful lies for an ugly truth. And somehow, that felt like progress. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it a pounding headache, and the kind of regret that felt like poison in Alyssa's veins. She woke to find Rachel already up, brewing coffee in the tiny kitchen and scrolling through her phone with the concentrated focus of someone conducting reconnaissance. Please tell me you found something that proves he's actually a legitimate businessman, Alyssa said, shuffling into the kitchen. Rachel looked up, her expression grim. I found exactly what he wants people to find, which is almost nothing. Castellano Enterprises exist. They own property all over the city. Thomas D'Angelo shows up at the right charity events, shakes hands with the right people, and somehow never gets investigated despite the fact that everyone seems to know what he really is. Which is? Connected. That's the word that keeps coming up in the forums I found. Not mobster, not criminal, just connected. People who know people. People who make problems disappear. Rachel set her phone down. Alyssa, it's not too late to back out. We can call him, cancel the meeting, pretend last night was just a bad dream. But Alyssa was already moving toward her closet, rifling through hangers with decisive movements. What does one wear to negotiate a marriage contract with a possibly connected businessman? I don't think Emily Post covered that particular scenario. Alyssa pulled out a navy suit. Professional, conservative, the kind of thing she wore to client presentations. Armor. This, she said, I wear this and I remember that I'm not some damsel in distress. I'm a business professional considering a business proposition. A business proposition that involves marriage to a stranger. A contract, Alyssa corrected, with terms and conditions and an expiration date. People do stranger things for money every day. Rachel poured 2 mugs of coffee, adding excessive sugar to Alyssa's the way she always did when she was worried. Promise me something. Promise me that if anything feels wrong in that meeting, if he says anything that scares you or makes you uncomfortable, we leave immediately. No hesitation, no second thoughts. We just leave. I promise. And you'll actually listen to your instincts instead of whatever revenge fantasy is currently clouding your judgment. Alyssa took the coffee, wrapping both hands around the warm mug. I'll try. That's not the same as promising. It's the best I can do right now. They finished their coffee in silence, both lost in thought. Alyssa's phone buzzed twice, once with a text from her mother asking how the anniversary dinner went, once with an email from HR at Morrison & Associates marked urgent. She ignored both. There would be time later to deal with the fallout of her very public humiliation, to explain to her mother that the wedding she'd been planning would never happen, to face whatever office politics awaited her at work. Right now, she needed to focus on not making another catastrophic mistake. By 9:30, they were in Rachel's car, navigating downtown traffic toward Castellano Tower. The building loomed ahead of them, all steel and glass, modern and imposing. The kind of building Alyssa might have designed in another life, when she still believed that creating beautiful structures for powerful people was a noble calling. Last chance, Rachel said as she pulled into the visitor parking garage. We can still turn around. But Alyssa was already unbuckling her seatbelt, already moving forward because stopping felt impossible. Momentum, she thought. Sometimes the only way out is through. The elevator to the penthouse required a security code, which the bored guard at the desk provided after checking their IDs against a list. As they rose 40 stories, Alyssa watched the city shrink below them, felt her stomach drop not just from the altitude, but from the sheer insanity of what she was doing. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that screamed quiet wealth. Marble floors, minimalist furniture, a stunning abstract painting that Alyssa recognized as an original Rothko. A woman in her 50s sat behind a glass desk, her smile professional and unrevealing. Miss Price and Miss Chen, she said before they could introduce themselves. Mr. D'Angelo is expecting you. Please, follow me. She led them down a hallway lined with more art. A Picasso sketch, what looked like a Monet, pieces that belonged in museums. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched out like a map of everything Alyssa had wanted and failed to achieve. The office they entered was enormous, dominated by a massive desk and a view that made the reception area's vista look modest by comparison. Thomas D'Angelo stood by the windows, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He held up one finger in acknowledgement, then turned back to his conversation. Alyssa used the moment to study him in daylight. Last night, in the shadows outside Bellecour, he'd seemed almost supernatural, a figure from a dream or nightmare. Here, in his own domain, he was revealed as simply a man, though simply did him a disservice. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, spoke with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. His suit probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. He ended the call and turned to face them fully, his smile warm in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. Miss Price, Miss Chen, thank you for coming. Please, sit. He gestured to a sitting area away from the desk, leather chairs arranged around a coffee table where a folder lay waiting. Rachel sat down stiffly, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. Alyssa took the chair directly across from Thomas, meeting his gaze with what she hoped looked like confidence rather than terror. I appreciate punctuality, Thomas said, settling into his own chair with the ease of a panther. It speaks to character. Let's skip the pleasantries, Alyssa said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. You said you had a contract. His smile widened, genuine amusement flickering across his features. Direct. I like that. Yes, I have a contract. He pushed the folder toward her. My lawyers worked through the night to prepare it. Everything we discussed is outlined in detail, including the financial arrangements, the term of the marriage, and the dissolution process. Alyssa opened the folder. The contract was thick, dense with legal language. She started reading, aware of Thomas watching her, of Rachel leaning over to read along. The terms were staggering. $250,000 upon signing, deposited into a new account in her name alone. Another $250,000 upon successful completion of a one-year term. A monthly stipend of $10,000 for expenses. Full access to a penthouse apartment in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. A clothing allowance. A car service. This is insane, Rachel muttered. This is business, Thomas corrected. Miss Price, you'll notice Clause 7. It outlines your responsibilities during our arrangement. Public appearances at various functions, charity galas, business dinners, social events. You'll be expected to present as my wife convincingly, to interact with certain individuals who need to believe our marriage is genuine. Certain individuals, Alyssa repeated. Like who? Business associates, city officials, people whose cooperation I require and who value traditional family structures. His expression remained neutral. The details of my business dealings are not included in this contract, nor should they concern you. Your role is simply to stand beside me and smile. And in private? Rachel asked sharply. What are the expectations there? We would maintain separate residences, Thomas said. The penthouse I'm offering Miss Price is in the same building as my own apartment, but 3 floors down, complete privacy. What she does with her time when we're not in public is her own business, so long as it doesn't create scandal or undermine the appearance we're presenting. Alyssa kept reading. Clause 12 made her pause. No romantic or sexual involvement with other parties during the contract term, she read aloud. That seems reasonable, Thomas finished. This arrangement only works if it's believable. A wife having affairs would undermine that belief. Similarly, I would refrain from any public romantic entanglements. How noble, Rachel said dryly. How practical, Thomas countered. Miss Chen, I understand your skepticism. If I were in your position, watching my best friend consider marriage to a stranger, I'd be skeptical too. But I assure you, this contract is designed to protect Miss Price as much as it protects me. He pulled another document from beneath the contract. This is a prenuptial agreement, ironically, given the circumstances. It ensures that should anything happen to me during our marriage, Miss Price receives nothing beyond what's outlined in the primary contract. No inheritance, no claim to my assets. Similarly, I have no claim to anything she earns or creates during our time together. Comforting, Alyssa murmured, still reading. And this, Thomas produced a third document, is a separate agreement regarding the information I promised you about Cameron Westbrook. Upon signing the marriage contract, you'll receive a comprehensive file detailing his financial improprieties, his relationship with Victoria Ashford that began long before last night, and several other pieces of information that would be quite damaging to his political aspirations if they became public. Mom, Alyssa looked up sharply. You already have this information? I make it my business to know things about people who might prove useful or problematic. Cameron Westbrook has been on my radar for some time. He's ambitious, careless, and backed by people who don't appreciate carelessness. The information in that file would destroy him. Why? Rachel asked. Why do you care about destroying some random political aide? I don't particularly, but Miss Price does, and her satisfaction is part of our business arrangement. Thomas leaned forward slightly. Let me be clear about something. I'm not doing this out of kindness or some misguided sense of chivalry. I need a wife. Miss Price needs money and revenge. Our interests align. That's all this is, an alignment of interests. Alyssa found herself appreciating his honesty. Cameron had spent months lying to her, hiding behind romantic gestures while planning her replacement. Thomas at least wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was. What happens if I want out early? She asked. If I decide after a month that this isn't working? Clause 18 covers early termination. You'd receive a prorated portion of the final payment based on time served. However, you'd forfeit the information about Cameron, and any assistance I might provide regarding his downfall would cease immediately. So I'd be trapped. No, Thomas said firmly. You'd be incentivized to complete the contract. There's a difference. You could leave at any time. There would simply be financial consequences, as there are consequences for breaking any business agreement. Rachel was shaking her head, her expression pained. Alyssa, this is crazy. You know this is crazy, right? But Alyssa was thinking about the apartment she'd have to leave, about the student loans, about walking into Morrison and Associates on Monday morning and facing the whispers, the pity, the knowledge that everyone saw her as the woman who wasn't good enough, about Cameron's smile last night, so confident in her powerlessness. What exactly do your business associates need to believe about our relationship? She asked Thomas. How convincing does this need to be? Convincing enough that when they see us together, they see a settled man, a man with domestic ties, family responsibilities, a man who has reasons to be cautious, to value stability. He paused. There are people in my world who view unmarried men as liabilities, unpredictable, more likely to take unnecessary risks. A wife suggests groundedness, maturity, someone with something to protect. Even a fake wife. They won't know she's fake. No one will. That's the point. Rachel stood abruptly. Can we have a moment, privately? Thomas rose smoothly. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be right outside. He left, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Rachel rounded on Alyssa immediately. Tell me you're not seriously considering this. I'm seriously considering this. He's a criminal, Liz. Maybe not convicted, maybe too smart to get caught, but you read between those lines. Business associates who need to believe he's stable? That's mob talk. That's organized crime talk. Maybe. Definitely, Rachel started pacing. And you want to marry into that? You want to tie yourself to whatever illegal things he's involved in? I want $250,000 immediately and another $250,000 in a year. I want Cameron to pay for what he did. I want to not feel powerless anymore. There are other ways. Name one. Alyssa stood too, facing her best friend. One way that gives me financial independence, lets me keep my dignity, and destroys Cameron all at the same time. Name one, Rachel, and I'll walk out of here right now. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. They both knew there was no alternative that accomplished all three. You could just move on, Rachel said quietly. Cut your losses. Find a new job, a new apartment. Build a new life that has nothing to do with Cameron or revenge or fake marriages to dangerous men. I could, Alyssa agreed, but I don't want to. For once in my life, I don't want to be the person who takes the high road, who forgives and forgets, who makes things easy for everyone else. Cameron humiliated me. He planned it. He chose that restaurant, invited all those people, orchestrated the whole thing like a campaign event. He wanted me broken and small and grateful for whatever scraps he left me. I won't give him that satisfaction. So instead, you'll give it to Thomas D'Angelo? You think he's any different? You think he sees you as anything other than a useful prop? No, Alyssa said. But at least he's honest about it. At least he's not pretending this is love or partnership or anything other than a business transaction. I can work with that, Rachel. I understand contracts. I understand terms and conditions. What I can't handle is more lies disguised as romance. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared for you. I'm scared for me too. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to say yes. They stood there in the enormous office, surrounded by wealth and power that felt as foreign as a different planet. Through the windows, the city gleamed, oblivious to the small human dramas playing out in its towers. If you do this, Rachel said finally, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be checking on you constantly. Daily phone calls, weekly visits. The first sign of trouble, the first moment you feel unsafe, you call me. Contract or no contract, money or no money, you call me and we figure out an exit strategy. I will. And you read every word of that contract before you sign anything. Every single word. I will. And you keep documentation of everything. Emails, texts, conversations, everything that happens during this year, you document it. Insurance, in case things go wrong. Okay. Rachel pulled her into a fierce hug. I still think this is the worst idea you've ever had. Noted. But I love you, and I'll support you, even when you're being an idiot. I love you too. They broke apart, wiping eyes, trying to reassemble some semblance of composure. Alyssa returned to the contract, reading more carefully now, looking for loopholes, traps, anything that would give Thomas more power than he already had. The document was surprisingly fair, almost too fair, which made her nervous. "Why me?" she asked when Thomas returned. "You could have found anyone for this. Why approach me specifically?" Thomas settled back into his chair, considering the question. "Several reasons. First, you were convenient. I was at Bellecour last night for a different meeting, happened to witness your public humiliation, and recognized an opportunity. Second, you have the right background. Educated, professional, no criminal record, no scandal. You're exactly the kind of woman my associates would expect me to marry. And third," he paused, "you have the look of someone who's been underestimated her entire life. Someone smart and capable who's been told she's not quite good enough. I find that quality useful. It breeds hunger, determination, a willingness to take risks that more comfortable people would avoid." "You psychoanalyzed all that from watching Cameron dump me?" "I psychoanalyzed all that from the research I did on you afterward. I know you worked 3 jobs to put yourself through architecture school. I know you got hired at Morrison and Associates. Not because of connections, but because your senior thesis redesign of the waterfront district was so impressive, they created a position for you. I know you've been passed over for promotion twice, despite being more talented than the men who got promoted instead. I know you're drowning in student debt despite working 60-hour weeks. I know you're tired of being invisible." His gaze was steady, unflinching. "I know exactly who you are, Alyssa Price. The question is whether you're ready to become someone different." The use of her first name felt intentional, intimate in a way that made her skin prickle. And who would that be? Someone who takes what she wants instead of waiting to be given permission. Someone who plays the game instead of being played. Someone who understands that power isn't about being good or deserving. It's about being smart enough to recognize opportunity and brave enough to seize it. Rachel made a disgusted sound. "This is a sales pitch. You're literally sales pitching her on becoming your fake wife." "I'm being honest about what I'm offering," Thomas corrected. "A year in my world will teach Miss Price more about how this city actually functions than a lifetime of following the rules ever could. She'll meet people who move money and power like chess pieces. She'll see how deals are really made, how influence is traded, how the game is actually played behind all the public theater. When our contract ends, she'll walk away with money, knowledge, and the tools to build whatever life she wants. Or she can leave now, go back to her apartment that isn't really hers, return to her job where she's undervalued, and watch Cameron Westbrook's star continue to rise while she fades into irrelevance." "You're a real bastard," Rachel said. "You know that?" "I've been called worse." He looked at Alyssa. "What's it going to be, Miss Price? Are you in or out?" Alyssa looked down at the contract in her hands, at the dollar amounts that could change her life, at the terms that would bind her to a stranger for a year. She thought about Cameron's face last night, about Victoria's sympathetic smile, about the 200 people who had watched her world end over champagne and canapes. She thought about the woman she'd been yesterday, trusting, naive, powerless, and the woman she could become tomorrow. "I need a pen," she said. Rachel closed her eyes. "Oh, Liz," Thomas smiled, pulling a fountain pen from his jacket. "I had a feeling you'd say yes." "Don't gloat. It's unattractive." "Noted." He handed her the pen. "Sign at the bottom of page 12. Initial pages 3, 7, and 9. Alyssa's hand trembled slightly as she poised the pen over the signature line. One stroke of ink and everything would change. No going back, no pretending this hadn't happened. She signed her name in a firm, clear script. Alyssa Catherine Price. Thomas countersigned, his signature an illegible slash of confidence. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. D'Angelo. We're not married yet. A technicality. I have a judge who owes me a favor. We can have the ceremony done by tomorrow afternoon. Quiet, private, just the necessary witnesses." "Tomorrow?" Alyssa's voice rose slightly. That's too fast. We have a gala on Saturday night. Important people will be there. I need to introduce you as my wife, not my fiancé. It's more convincing." Saturday is 3 days away, which gives you today to move into the penthouse, tomorrow to get married, and Friday to prepare. My assistant will help you with everything: wardrobe, styling, the necessary background you'll need to answer questions about our relationship. Think of it as intensive training. Alyssa felt the room tilt slightly. This was real. This was actually happening. Breathe, Rachel said, gripping her hand. Just breathe. I should mention, Thomas continued, that the first installment of your payment has already been transferred to the account my lawyers set up for you this morning. You should have access within the hour. He slid a bank card across the table. In the meantime, this is connected to your monthly stipend, $10,000, refreshed on the first of every month. Use it for whatever you need. Alyssa picked up the card with numb fingers. It was heavy, metal, the kind of card she'd only seen in commercials. Her name was embossed in silver. Alyssa C. Price. Not D'Angelo. He'd kept his promise about that, at least. The penthouse is ready for you, Thomas said, standing. I'll have my driver take you there now. Your belongings from your current apartment will be moved this afternoon. I took the liberty of arranging movers, unless there's anything you need to handle personally. You took the liberty, Alyssa repeated faintly. You arranged movers. When? This morning. I was confident you'd sign. Arrogant. Practical. He moved toward the door. I'll meet you at the penthouse in 2 hours. We need to discuss Saturday night, and you should see the space you'll be living in. Miss Chen, you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. I understand the need for familiar faces during transitions. He left before either of them could respond, the door closing with that same soft click. Alyssa and Rachel sat in stunned silence. Well, Rachel finally said, I guess you're getting married tomorrow. I guess I am. To a mobster. Possibly. For money and revenge. Definitely. Rachel started laughing, the slightly hysterical edge to it suggesting she might also be crying. Your mother is going to lose her mind. My mother doesn't need to know. No one needs to know except you. What are you going to tell people at work? That I eloped. That I met someone and fell in love and couldn't wait. The lies came easily, surprisingly so. Cameron made me look like a fool in front of everyone. Let them think I bounced back instantly. Let them think I found someone better. You found someone richer. Better is debatable. They gathered the contracts, the bank card, the file on Cameron that Thomas had promised. Alyssa opened it briefly, saw financial records, photographs, email transcripts. Her hands shook as she closed it again. I'll read that later, she said, when I can process it. Thomas's driver was waiting for them in the garage, a silent man in a black suit who held the Mercedes door open and didn't ask questions. The drive to the residential tower took 15 minutes through mid-morning traffic. Rachel held Alyssa's hand the entire way, neither of them speaking, both trying to comprehend how much had changed in less than 24 hours. The building was even more exclusive than the one housing Castellano Enterprises. Doormen in uniforms, marble lobbies, the kind of hushed wealth that didn't need to advertise itself. The penthouse elevator required another code, delivering them directly into an apartment that stole Alyssa's breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park. An open kitchen with appliances that looked like art installations. Furniture that managed to be both modern and comfortable. A palette of creams and grays and soft blues. 2 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a study, a balcony that wrapped around the entire floor. This is insane, Rachel whispered, walking through the space with wide eyes. This place probably costs more per month than we make in a year. Alyssa stood in the living room trying to imagine herself living here, waking up to these views, cooking in that kitchen, sleeping in the master bedroom with its king bed and silk sheets, playing house in a fake marriage to a man she barely knew. Her phone buzzed. The bank app notification. Deposit received $250,000. The number seemed impossible, fictional. More money than she'd ever imagined having all at once. It's real, she said aloud, showing Rachel the screen. It's actually real. Yeah. Rachel's voice was quiet. It is. They explored the penthouse together, opening closets that were already stocked with clothes in Alyssa's size, discovering a wine fridge filled with bottles that probably cost more than her car, finding a folder on the kitchen counter labeled essential information in crisp block letters. Inside, Thomas's schedule for the next month, a list of names and faces she needed to memorize, background on the charity gala Saturday night, a page titled Our Story, outlining the fiction they'd be selling to the world. According to the document, they'd met 6 months ago at an art gallery opening. Love at first sight, a whirlwind romance kept private because of Thomas's business dealings and Alyssa's relationship with Cameron. When Cameron had publicly humiliated her, Thomas had swept in, proposed immediately, refused to wait another moment to make her his wife. It was romantic, dramatic, completely unbelievable, and yet Alyssa knew people would buy it. People wanted to believe in fairy tales, even dark ones. 6 months ago, Rachel read over her shoulder, he's claiming you've been together for 6 months, which means you were supposedly cheating on Cameron with him. Turnabout's fair play. Except you weren't actually cheating, Cameron was. But no one else knows that. Let them think I was smarter than I looked. Let them think I had an escape plan all along. The lies were getting easier. That should have worried her more than it did. A key turned in the lock. Both women spun toward the door as Thomas entered, carrying a garment bag and looking entirely too comfortable in what was supposed to be her private space. "I see you found the information packet," he said, hanging the garment bag on a hook by the door. "Good. We have a lot to cover before Saturday." "You have a key to my apartment," Alyssa said. "I have a key to my apartment, which I'm letting you use, but I won't intrude without notice, if that's your concern. Privacy is important to both of us." "Then why are you here now?" "Because we need to establish some ground rules and go over your cover story until you can recite it in your sleep. Saturday night, you'll meet some very dangerous people, Miss Price. People who will be looking for any sign that our marriage isn't genuine. If they suspect this is an arrangement rather than a real relationship, it could create significant problems for both of us." "Define significant problems," Rachel said. Thomas's expression went cold. "The kind that end with people in the river. Which is why it's crucial that Alyssa and I present a united front, a believable front." The casual mention of murder should have sent Alyssa running. Instead, she found herself asking, "What do you need me to do?" Thomas moved to the dining table, spreading out photographs like a dealer arranging cards. "First, you need to know who you'll be meeting. These are the key players in my world, the ones who matter most." Alyssa joined him reluctantly, Rachel hovering protective at her shoulder. The faces staring up from the glossy prints ranged from distinguished older men in expensive suits to younger sharks with calculating eyes. Each photo had a name and brief description written on the back in precise handwriting. "Marco Castellano," Thomas said, tapping the first image. "My uncle. Technically the head of the family business, though his health has been declining. He'll want to meet you, assess whether you're suitable. Be respectful, but not obsequious. He values strength." "Family business," Rachel muttered. "Is that what we're calling it?" Thomas ignored her, moving to the next photo. Franco Versani. He runs operations on the east side. Ambitious, ruthless, and currently looking for any weakness he can exploit. He'll test you, try to rattle you. Don't give him the satisfaction. "How exactly would he test me?" "Questions that seem innocent but aren't. Comments designed to make you uncomfortable. He might mention your ex-fiancée, make knowing remarks about the speed of our relationship. The key is to remain calm, even bored by his attempts, like swatting away a mosquito." Alyssa studied Franco's face. He was handsome in a sharp way, his smile not quite reaching his dark eyes. Something about him reminded her of a snake assessing whether you were prey or predator. "And if I can't remain calm, then he'll sense blood in the water and circle closer, which is why we're practicing." Thomas pulled out a chair for her. "Sit. We're going to run through scenarios until your responses are automatic." The next 2 hours were grueling. Thomas fired questions at her, each one designed to probe, to unsettle, to find the cracks in her story. Rachel watched from the couch, occasionally interjecting when she thought Alyssa's answers sounded too rehearsed or not convincing enough. "How did you meet?" Thomas asked for the 5th time. "At the Meridian Gallery opening in April," Alyssa recited. "You were looking at a Kandinsky. I made a comment about the composition. You said most people just pretend to understand abstract art to seem cultured, but I actually saw what the artist intended. We talked for 3 hours. And you didn't mention having a fiancé? I did. You said you didn't care. You said some connections transcend circumstances. Romantic. Thomas's tone was dry. When did you fall in love? This question still tripped her up. I don't know. Gradually, then suddenly, the way it always happens. Too vague. Hedging. If someone asks, you need a specific moment, something concrete they can picture. Alyssa rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. Fine. It was the night we went to that jazz club in the village. You knew the musician, got us a table right by the stage. During the third set, you reached for my hand without looking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's when I knew. Something flickered across Thomas's face, gone too quickly to identify. Better. Use that. They moved through the fictional timeline of their relationship, establishing touchstones and shared memories that never happened. The weekend in Newport that was actually a business meeting Thomas had attended alone. The small Italian restaurant where he'd supposedly proposed, which Alyssa would need to visit before Saturday so she could describe it convincingly. The carefully constructed lie of a love story that would need to withstand scrutiny from people who made their living reading deception. What about physical affection? Rachel asked suddenly. If you're supposed to be madly in love newlyweds, people will expect you to be comfortable touching each other. Are you going to practice that too? The question hung in the air, awkward and necessary. Alyssa hadn't let herself think about that aspect yet, about the reality of standing beside Thomas at public events, of playing the role convincingly enough that no one doubted. Thomas stood, extending his hand to her. She's right. We should establish comfort with basic physical contact now before we're in front of an audience. Alyssa looked at his outstretched hand like it might bite her. What exactly are you suggesting? Nothing untoward. Simply that we practice standing together, moving together. A hand at the small of your back when we walk into a room. My arm around your shoulders during conversation. The casual intimacy that couples display without thinking. He kept his hand extended, waiting. Unless you'd prefer to figure it out on Saturday night in front of Marco and Franco and everyone else. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. His grip was firm, warm, completely impersonal, like shaking hands with a client before a presentation. Put your hand on my arm, he instructed, like we're walking into the gala together. Alyssa placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the expensive fabric of his suit, the solid muscle beneath. They stood there awkwardly, two strangers playing dress-up. You're too stiff, Thomas said. Relax, lean into me slightly. We're supposed to be in love, remember? You should look comfortable, not like you're being held hostage. I feel ridiculous. You look ridiculous, which is why we're practicing. He started walking, and she had to adjust her stride to match his. Better. Now, I'm going to put my hand on your back. Don't flinch. His palm settled against the curve of her spine, light pressure guiding her movements. Alyssa focused on breathing normally, on not reacting to the strange intimacy of the gesture. This is deeply weird, Rachel observed from the couch. This is necessary, Thomas corrected. At the gala, people will be watching every interaction. Any discomfort between us will be noted and analyzed. We need to appear natural together. They practiced walking, standing, the small unconscious touches that signified couplehood. Thomas's hand occasionally finding hers, her head tilting toward his when he spoke. The choreography of a relationship that didn't exist. What if someone asks about the wedding? Alyssa asked during a water break. Won't people wonder why we're rushing into marriage? Thomas handed her a bottle from the refrigerator. We're telling people it's happening tomorrow. Private ceremony. Just immediate family. After what happened with Cameron, you wanted something small and meaningful instead of a public spectacle. I wanted to make you mine immediately. Couldn't wait another moment. It's impulsive, romantic, exactly what people expect from new love. And your family is okay with this? With you marrying a stranger? My uncle knows the truth. He's the one who suggested I needed to settle down, actually. Make myself look more stable, more invested in long-term planning. The rest of the family will believe what they're told. He paused. You'll meet Marco tomorrow, before the ceremony. He'll want to take your measure. The casual mention of meeting the head of what was essentially a crime family sent anxiety skittering down Alyssa's spine. What if he doesn't approve? He will. You're exactly what I told him I needed. Smart, presentable, capable of discretion. He'll appreciate the strategic value of our arrangement, even if he doesn't know all the details. Rachel stood abruptly. I need to go. I have a shift at the hospital in an hour, and I need to process whatever fresh hell this day has been. Alyssa walked her to the door away from Thomas's hearing. Are you okay? Am I okay? Are you okay? You just spent 2 hours rehearsing a fake relationship with a man who casually mentions people ending up in rivers. Rachel's eyes were worried, searching. Tell me this is going to be fine. Tell me you know what you're doing. I have no idea what I'm doing, Alyssa admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. That's what I'm afraid of. Rachel hugged her tightly. Call me tonight, and tomorrow, and every day until I'm convinced you're not in over your head. I'm definitely in over my head, but I'll call anyway. After Rachel left, the penthouse felt enormous and empty. Thomas had moved to the windows, phone to his ear again, speaking in rapid Italian that Alyssa couldn't follow. She found herself studying him when he wasn't looking, trying to reconcile the dangerous man everyone said he was with the person who'd spent the afternoon patiently coaching her through fictional memories. He ended his call and turned to find her watching. Your things from the apartment should arrive within the hour. I'll leave you to settle in. Tomorrow, a car will pick you up at noon. Dress nicely, but not formally. We're meeting Marco at his estate before going to the courthouse. Just like that? No rehearsal for meeting the crime boss? A smile tugged at his mouth. Just be yourself. Marco appreciates authenticity, ironically. Answer his questions honestly when you can, deflect gracefully when you can't. He'll know you're nervous, that's expected. What he'll be looking for is whether you're smart enough to handle yourself in uncomfortable situations. And if I'm not, then we'll deal with that when it happens. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you'll be fine. You've already proven you can keep your composure under pressure. Last night at Bellecour, you could have fallen apart. Instead, you walked out with your head high. That takes strength. The compliment, unexpected and seemingly genuine, caught her off guard. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've survived your first family dinner. He left before she could respond, the door clicking shut with its now familiar finality. Alyssa stood alone in the penthouse that was supposed to be her home for the next year, surrounded by luxuries she hadn't earned and stepping into a life she didn't understand. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. How was the anniversary dinner? Call me when you can. The lies were piling up already. Her mother, her colleagues, everyone who knew her would need to believe the fairy tale. That she'd met someone wonderful, fallen desperately in love, found her happy ending despite Cameron's betrayal. The thought exhausted her. She opened the file on Cameron instead, needing to remind herself why she'd agreed to this insanity. The documents inside were damning, financial records showing him funneling campaign donations into personal accounts, emails between him and Victoria dating back 8 months, discussing strategy for his political career and how Alyssa was too middle class to help his image long term. Photographs of them together at events Alyssa hadn't been invited to, Victoria's hand possessive on his arm. The evidence would destroy him. One anonymous tip to the right journalist, and Cameron's political dreams would evaporate. Senator Morrison would distance himself immediately. The donors would disappear. Victoria would probably bail the moment the scandal broke. Alyssa closed the file, feeling sick and satisfied in equal measure. This was power. This was what Thomas had promised her. The ability to decide Cameron's fate, to be the architect of his downfall instead of his victim. The movers arrived as promised, carrying boxes from her old apartment. It was startling to see how little she actually owned. Years of life reduced to a dozen cardboard containers that looked lost in the massive penthouse. She directed them to the bedroom, tipping generously with the metal card that still felt like play money. Unpacking was surreal. Her cheap bookshelf looked absurd next to the built-in shelving that probably cost more than her car. Her clothes, nice enough for her old life, seemed shabby in the walk-in closet that was already half filled with designer pieces in her size. Everything felt wrong, like she was a child playing dress-up in adult spaces. Her phone rang. Unknown number, she answered warily. Miss Price? The voice was gravelly, old, carrying the weight of authority. This is Marco Castellano. Thomas tells me you'll be joining our family tomorrow. Alyssa's heart hammered. Yes, sir. I look forward to meeting you. Thomas speaks highly of your intelligence and discretion. Two qualities I value greatly. Thank you. My nephew has made many decisions over the years, some wise, some less so. I trust this will prove to be among the wiser choices. The implicit threat in the words was unmistakable. I hope I won't disappoint you. We shall see. Tomorrow at noon, Miss Price. Don't be late. He hung up before she could respond. Alyssa set her phone down with shaking hands. This was real. This was actually terrifyingly real. Tomorrow she would meet the head of a crime family and then marry his nephew in what amounted to a business transaction dressed up as romance. She should call Rachel, call her mother, call someone and tell them she'd made a terrible mistake. Instead, she opened her laptop and started researching Marco Castellano, Franco Versani, and everyone else whose faces Thomas had shown her. If she was going to survive in this world, she needed to understand it. The internet yielded little of substance. Carefully curated public personas, charity work, legitimate business holdings. Nothing that proved criminal activity, but nothing that disproved it either. These were men who existed in shadows, who wielded power without leaving fingerprints. Alyssa worked until her eyes burned, memorizing faces and names, building mental dossiers on the people who would scrutinize her tomorrow and at the gala Saturday. Somewhere around midnight, she fell asleep at the dining table, laptop still open, surrounded by the detritus of her crash course in organized crime. She woke to sunlight streaming through the massive windows and Thomas standing in her kitchen making coffee like he belonged there. "You gave yourself a key," she said groggily, deeply aware that she was still in yesterday's clothes, her hair a disaster. "I told you I owned the apartment." He poured 2 mugs, adding cream to one without asking her preference. Somehow he knew she took cream, no sugar. "You should shower and change. We leave in 90 minutes. Alyssa accepted the coffee, needing the caffeine more than she needed to argue about boundaries. "I fell asleep at the table." "I noticed. You were researching last night. Smart. Knowledge is armor in my world." He gestured toward the garment bag he'd brought yesterday, now hanging in the entrance. "I had my assistant select something appropriate for today. The courthouse has a dress code and Marco appreciates traditional presentation." She wanted to argue, to assert some control over her own clothing choices, but the truth was she had no idea what one wore to meet a crime boss before a fake wedding. "Thank you. Don't thank me, just be ready on time." Thomas left her to prepare and Alyssa showered quickly, trying to wash away the anxiety that clung to her skin like oil. The dress in the garment bag was stunning, a sleeveless sheath in dove gray that managed to be both conservative and elegant. It fit perfectly, of course. Thomas seemed to have thought of everything. She was applying makeup when her phone rang. Her mother. The call she'd been dreading. "Hi, Mom. Alyssa Catherine Price. Why am I hearing from Marjorie Henderson that you were publicly dumped at Bellecourt 2 nights ago? Why didn't you call me?" "Because I've been busy agreeing to marry a mobster for money," Alyssa thought. "I'm sorry, it's been chaotic. Are you okay? Do you need me to come stay with you? I can be on a plane tonight." "I'm fine, actually. Better than fine." The lie came smoothly, practiced. "Mom, I have something to tell you. I'm getting married." Silence. Then, "What?" "I've been seeing someone. Thomas. We met months ago and we've been keeping it quiet because of Cameron, but now that's over and we don't want to wait anymore. We're getting married today." "Today? Alyssa, this is insane. Who is this man? I don't understand." "His name is Thomas D'Angelo. He's a businessman here in the city. We're very much in love, and I know this seems sudden, but Mom, he's wonderful. He makes me feel valued in ways Cameron never did." More silence. Alyssa could practically hear her mother's brain short-circuiting. "You're serious. Completely serious. It's going to be small, just immediate family. I know you can't get here in time, but we'll have a proper celebration later, I promise." "Alyssa, slow down. Think about this. You just got out of a relationship. You're emotional. You're hurt. This isn't the time to make life-altering decisions." "I've thought about it. I'm sure." How many times would she have to tell this lie before it started to feel true? "I'll send you photos. And you'll meet him soon, I promise. You'll love him." Her mother was crying now, soft sounds of worry and confusion. I just want you to be happy, sweetheart. I am. I really am. Another lie. She was collecting them like souvenirs. I have to go, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? She ended the call before her mother could protest further, feeling hollowed out and guilty. More casualties of her decision. More people she was lying to. Thomas knocked precisely at 11:30. Ready? Alyssa grabbed a small purse, checked her reflection one final time. The woman in the mirror looked sophisticated, composed, nothing like the heartbroken girl who'd stumbled out of Bellecourt 2 nights ago. As I'll ever be. The drive to Marco Castellano's estate took 40 minutes, out of the city and into the countryside where old money went to avoid scrutiny. The property was massive, surrounded by iron gates and mature trees, the house itself a sprawling villa that looked transported from Tuscany. Nervous? Thomas asked as they pulled through the gates. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just remember what we practiced. Answer honestly when you can. Smile gracefully when you can't. Marco will respect strength more than false sweetness. They parked in a circular drive where 2 men in dark suits stood watch. The guards nodded to Thomas, their eyes assessing Alyssa with professional detachment. She felt like a specimen being examined, catalogued, judged. Inside, the villa was all old-world elegance. Marble floors, oil paintings and gilded frames, furniture that whispered of generations and inheritance. A woman in her 60s greeted them, her smile kind but her eyes shrewd. Thomas, darling, and this must be Alyssa. I'm Sophia, Marco's wife. Welcome. Sophia's handshake was firm, her assessment thorough. You're lovelier than the photographs. Come, Marco is waiting in the garden. He prefers fresh air these days. They followed her through French doors into a garden that was more sanctuary than landscape. Stone paths wound between flowering beds, fountains murmured, and in the center of it all, an old man sat in a wheelchair, his body frail but his eyes sharp as broken glass. Marco Castellano looked like he'd been carved from granite in time. Despite the wheelchair, despite the oxygen tank discreetly positioned beside him, he radiated authority. This was a man who had built an empire, who had outlasted enemies and allies alike, who knew secrets that could topple governments. Uncle, Thomas said, bending to kiss the old man's cheek, this is Alyssa Price. Marco's gaze fixed on her, and Alyssa felt pinned like a butterfly under examination. Miss Price, sit. Tell me why you want to marry my nephew. The bluntness was startling. No pleasantries, no small talk, straight to the heart of things. Alyssa sat in the chair indicated, meeting his stare as steadily as she could manage. Because he offered me an opportunity I couldn't refuse. Thomas tensed slightly beside her, but Marco's laugh was genuine, delighted. Honest! Thomas said you were smart. Intelligence without honesty is just cunning, but together? He nodded approvingly. Tell me about this opportunity. Financial security, knowledge, and the satisfaction of watching someone who wronged me face consequences. Your ex-fiancé. Thomas told me about him. Ambitious little weasel working for Morrison, yes? Marco's English was barely accented, refined. You want revenge. I want justice. There's a difference. Is there? His smile was knowing. Justice is what we call revenge when we want to feel righteous about it. But I appreciate the distinction. He gestured to Sophia, who brought forward a folder. Thomas provided me with the information he gathered on Cameron Westbrook. Impressive work. You'll use it? When the time is right. Smart girl. Patience is rare these days. Everyone wants satisfaction immediately. Consequences be damned. He studied her for a long moment. My nephew is entering a delicate phase of his life. He needs stability, the appearance of domestic happiness. You understand this marriage is a business arrangement? Completely. And you're comfortable with that? With being, essentially, an employee? I'm comfortable with honest transactions. I know what I'm getting. I know what's expected of me. That's more than I had in my last relationship. Marco laughed again, the sound turning into a cough that Sophia rushed to help with. When he recovered, his expression had sobered. You'll meet difficult people in our world, Miss Price. Franco Versani particularly will test you. He's been waiting for Thomas to show weakness, to make a mistake. A sudden marriage to a stranger could be seen as impulsive, emotional, evidence of poor judgment, or evidence of decisive action and commitment to long-term planning, Alyssa countered. Perspective matters. Indeed it does. Marco's approval was clear now. Thomas, you chose well. She has spine. Thank you, Uncle. One more question, Miss Price. Marco leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. What happens in a year when your contract ends? What stops you from taking your money and Thomas's secrets and selling them to the highest bidder? The question was a trap, and Alyssa knew it. Answer wrong, and this whole thing could fall apart. Self-preservation. If I betrayed Thomas, I'd be betraying you. And I'm smart enough to know that people who betray the Castellano family don't tend to enjoy long, healthy lives. The money is good, but living to spend it is better. Silence. Then Marco smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the calculated assessment. You'll do. You'll do very well indeed. He waved a hand in dismissal. Go, get married, make it convincing. And Alyssa? She turned back. Yes? Welcome to the family. Try not to make me regret this. I'll do my best. Sophia walked them back to the car, her hand gentle on Alyssa's arm. Don't let Marco frighten you too much. His bark is worse than his bite these days, mostly. She smiled. And Thomas is a good man, despite what you might hear. He'll take care of you, even in this unusual arrangement. Thank you. In the car, Alyssa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Well? You did perfectly, Thomas said, pulling out of the estate. Marco's approval isn't easily won. The fact that you were honest with him made all the difference. I was terrified. You didn't show it. That's what matters. He glanced at her. Ready for part 2? The courthouse ceremony was surreal in its mundanity. A board clerk, a judge who'd clearly done this 1,000 times, paperwork that transformed them from strangers into spouses with a few signatures and stamps. Thomas's assistant served as one witness, the clerk's secretary as the other. No family, no friends, no celebration, just a transaction made legal. You may kiss the bride, the judge said perfunctorily. Thomas looked at her, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and he leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that lasted less than 2 seconds, but somehow felt like crossing a threshold from which there was no return. Congratulations, the judge said, already shuffling papers for his next appointment. You're married. And just like that, Alyssa Price became Alyssa D'Angelo, at least on paper. The reality of it hit her as they walked back to the car, the marriage certificate heavy in her purse. How do you feel? Thomas asked. Like I just signed away my life. You signed a contract with an expiration date. Not the same thing. He opened the car door for her. Saturday night, we'll introduce you properly to everyone who matters. Until then, you should rest. The next few days will be intense. Back at the penthouse, Alyssa changed out of the gray dress and stood in the massive closet, surrounded by clothes that weren't hers and a life that didn't fit. Her phone buzzed with congratulatory texts from her mother, from colleagues at Morrison and Associates who'd somehow already heard, from people she barely knew offering best wishes on her sudden marriage. The lies were spreading, taking root, growing into something that would be impossible to untangle when this year was over. Rachel called at 7. Did you actually do it? Did you actually marry him? I actually married him. How do you feel? Like I'm watching someone else live my life, like this is all happening to a different person. That's called dissociation, and it's not healthy. Nothing about this situation is healthy. Silence. Then Rachel's voice, smaller, worried. Are you safe? Alyssa looked around the penthouse, at the luxury and the isolation and the strange liminal space between her old life and whatever came next. I think so. Ask me again after Saturday. Saturday. The gala, where I get to meet Franco Versani and prove I'm convincing enough to fool dangerous people into thinking this marriage is real. No pressure. None at all. They talked for another hour, Rachel filling her in on hospital gossip, on mundane, normal things that felt like lifelines to the world Alyssa had left behind. When they finally hung up, the penthouse felt too quiet, too empty. Alyssa opened her laptop, pulling up the file on Cameron again. Tomorrow she'd start planning exactly how and when to deploy this information, how to time the release for maximum damage, how to watch from the shadows as his world crumbled the way hers had. The revenge should have felt sweeter. Instead, it just felt necessary, cold and calculated, and not about justice at all, despite what she'd told Marco. Her phone buzzed. Thomas. Sleep well, Mrs. D'Angelo. Tomorrow we start preparing for Saturday in earnest. Mrs. D'Angelo. The name looked wrong attached to her identity, alien and temporary and weighted with implications she was only beginning to understand. Alyssa set her phone aside and walked to the windows, looking out over the city that sparkled below like a circuit board, all connections and currents and hidden networks of power. Somewhere out there, Cameron was probably celebrating his new relationship with Victoria, secure in his trajectory, unaware that his former fiancée now held the keys to his destruction. Somewhere else, Franco Versani was preparing to test her, to find her breaking point, to see if Thomas's sudden marriage was vulnerability or strategy. And in his own penthouse 3 floors above, Thomas D'Angelo was probably working, managing whatever illegal empires required managing, confident that his new wife would play her part convincingly enough to keep them both alive. Alyssa touched the window glass, cold against her palm. In less than 48 hours, she'd gone from heartbroken architect to mob wife. The whiplash was making her dizzy. But beneath the fear and the surrealism, something else stirred, something that felt almost like excitement. For the first time in her life, she was the one holding cards, the one with power, the one who got to decide how the game would play. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Learning to navigate a world where smiles concealed threats and every conversation was a negotiation, where weakness meant death and strength was the only currency that mattered. Alyssa pulled the curtains closed, shutting out the city and its glittering promises. She had one day to prepare for Saturday night, one day to transform from terrified imposter into convincing mob wife, one day to become someone strong enough to survive what was coming. She went to bed in silk sheets that cost more than her monthly rent used to, wearing pajamas she hadn't bought, in an apartment that wasn't really hers, married to a man she barely knew. And somewhere in the darkness, she heard herself laugh. Not happy, not sad, just the slightly unhinged sound of someone who had jumped off a cliff and was still waiting to see if she'd fly or fall. Friday morning arrived with Isabella Moretti, Thomas's assistant, appearing at the penthouse door at precisely 8 o'clock carrying garment bags, makeup cases, and an intensity that made Alyssa feel immediately inadequate. Mrs. D'Angelo, Isabella said, sweeping past her into the living room. We have 8 hours to transform you into someone who belongs at Thomas's side. Let's not waste time. Alyssa closed the door, still in her robe, coffee barely touched. Good morning to you too. Isabella was already unpacking, spreading dresses across the couch with the precision of a general planning an invasion. She was perhaps 40, elegant in the way Italian women seemed born knowing how to be, her dark hair pulled into a severe chignon that somehow looked effortless rather than harsh. Thomas told me you're intelligent, which helps. Intelligence can compensate for lack of experience. She turned to assess Alyssa critically. You have good bone structure. The dress yesterday was acceptable but safe. Tonight, you need to be memorable. Franco Versani will be looking for any sign of weakness, any hint that you don't belong. We won't give him the satisfaction. I appreciate the confidence. It's not confidence, it's strategy. Now sit. We're starting with your cover story. I want to hear you tell me how you met Thomas, and it needs to sound natural, not rehearsed. The next hour was more grueling than Alyssa's architecture licensing exam. Isabella fired questions, interrupted, circled back to inconsistencies, pushed until Alyssa could recite their fictional history without hesitation, where they'd had their first kiss, what Thomas ordered at the Italian restaurant where he'd proposed, the song that had been playing at the jazz club the night she'd fallen in love. Better, Isabella finally conceded. You're a quick study. Now, let's discuss the people you'll meet tonight. Thomas showed you photographs, but photographs don't capture personality. Franco Versani, for instance, appears charming in pictures. In person, he's a shark who enjoys watching people squirm. Thomas mentioned that. Thomas gave you the overview. I'm giving you survival tactics. Isabella pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo of Franco at some previous event. He'll compliment you in ways designed to make you uncomfortable. He'll stand too close. He'll ask invasive questions about your relationship, your past, your intentions. The goal is to make you react, to catch you off guard. And I should? Remain bored, politely bored, but bored nonetheless. Like he's a persistent salesman, and you're not interested in what he's selling. Answer questions with minimal detail. Never justify, never explain excessively. Women who over-explain signal nervousness. Alyssa absorbed this, filing it away with all the other rules for this strange new world. Who else should I watch out for? Practically everyone, but specifically Lucia Santoro. She's Franco's cousin, runs his money laundering operations through her art galleries. She'll approach you woman to woman, seem sympathetic about your whirlwind romance, ask probing questions disguised as friendly interest. Isabella's expression hardened. Don't trust the sisterhood angle. She reports everything back to Franco. They spent another hour going through the guest list, building profiles of who mattered and why. By 10 o'clock, Alyssa's head was spinning with names and alliances and feuds that went back generations. Now we address the aesthetic, Isabella announced, gesturing to the dresses. You need to project confidence without arrogance, elegance without trying too hard. Thomas's wife should look like she belongs in his world, but isn't defined by it. The dress Isabella selected was stunning, a floor-length gown in deep emerald silk that caught the light like water. Not the same emerald as the dress Cameron had chosen for her humiliation, but close enough to feel like reclaiming something stolen. Try it on, Isabella instructed. In the bedroom, Alyssa slipped into the gown. It fit like it had been made for her body specifically, hugging curves she usually hid under professional clothes. The neckline was modest, but the back plunged low, the silk cool against her skin. She emerged to find Isabella nodding approvingly. Yes, that's the one. You look powerful, sexual without being obvious about it. Exactly right. It's a lot of dress. It's armor. Never forget that. Isabella circled her, adjusting the drape of fabric. In Thomas's world, appearance is information. Every choice you make tonight will be analyzed. The dress says you're confident enough to stand out, sophisticated enough to belong, and completely unbothered by anyone's opinion. A stylist arrived at noon, transforming Alyssa's hair into an elegant updo that made her neck look longer, her features sharper. Makeup followed, subtle but striking, emphasizing her eyes until they looked almost feline. By the time they finished, Alyssa barely recognized herself in the mirror. Good, Isabella said. Now walk for me. Let me see how you move in the dress. Alyssa walked the length of the penthouse, feeling self-conscious and powerful in equal measure. The silk whispered against her legs, the heels Isabella had selected adding 3 inches to her height. Slower, Isabella corrected. You're not rushing to a meeting. You're a woman who knows people will wait for her. Own the space you're moving through. They practiced until Alyssa's feet ached, until moving in the dress felt natural rather than costume-like. Isabella critiqued her posture, her stride, the way she held her head. Every detail mattered, apparently, in this performance she was about to give. At 3 o'clock, Thomas arrived, stopping short when he saw her. Something flickered across his face, gone too quickly to identify. Well? Alyssa asked, fighting the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. You look perfect, he said simply. Isabella, excellent work. She's a good canvas, Isabella replied. Smart, learns quickly, doesn't argue about every suggestion. Thomas moved closer, his gaze assessing but not unkind. How are you feeling, honestly? Terrified. But I think I'm ready. You'll do more than fine. He pulled a jewelry box from his pocket. I should have given you this yesterday at the courthouse, but the moment didn't seem right. May I? Inside the box lay a wedding ring, platinum with a single diamond, elegant and understated. Thomas took her left hand, sliding the ring onto her finger beside the engagement ring she'd been wearing since yesterday. His touch was gentle, impersonal, but Alyssa felt the significance of the gesture settle over her like a weight. There, he said. Now you look properly married. The rings felt foreign on her hand, beautiful and wrong. But she forced herself to smile, to act like this was normal, like receiving wedding jewelry from a husband she barely knew didn't make her want to run screaming. Thank you, they're beautiful. They belong to my grandmother, Marco insisted. Thomas released her hand. The car will be here at 7. The gala starts at 8, but we're arriving at 8:30. Never arrive on time to these things. Let people anticipate your entrance. After he left, Isabella helped Alyssa out of the dress and into comfortable clothes. You should rest, she advised. Tonight will be exhausting. These events always are, even when you're not being evaluated by everyone in the room. Comforting. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to prepare you. Isabella's expression softened slightly. But for what it's worth, you're handling this better than most would. Thomas chose well, even if the circumstances are unconventional. Alone again, Alyssa tried to nap, but sleep was impossible. She lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, running through everything Isabella had taught her. The names, the relationships, the careful choreography of tonight's performance. One mistake could unravel everything. Rachel called at 5. Big night. How are you holding up? Ask me tomorrow when it's over. That bad? I spent all day being trained like I'm going into battle, which I guess I am in a way. Alyssa sat up, needing to move. Rachel, what if I can't pull this off? What if Franco sees right through me? Then you smile, excuse yourself to the bathroom, and call me. We'll figure it out. Rachel's voice was firm. But you're going to be fine. You've survived worse than a fancy party. Have I, though? You survived yesterday's lunch with the actual mob boss. Comparatively, this should be easy. Alyssa laughed despite herself. Your definition of easy is deeply concerning. That's what best friends are for, unrealistic optimism in the face of terrible decisions. They talked until Alyssa had to start getting ready. Rachel's voice anchored a normalcy in the surreal ocean she was drowning in. At 6:30, Alyssa began the transformation process. The dress, the jewelry, the makeup carefully reapplied. By 7, she stood in front of the full-length mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. She looked like someone important, someone powerful, someone who belonged at Thomas D'Angelo's side. The illusion was perfect. Thomas arrived precisely at 7, devastating in a custom tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped from a film. He stopped in the doorway, his usual composure slipping for just a moment. You're staring, Alyssa said, fighting nervousness. You're stunning. I'm allowed to notice. He offered his arm. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. The car ride to the plaza was quiet, both of them lost in thought. Alyssa watched the city slide past, lights beginning to glow as evening settled. In a few hours, this night would be over. She'd either have convinced everyone she was Thomas's wife, or she'd have failed spectacularly. No pressure at all. Remember, Thomas said as they pulled up to the venue, we're madly in love. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I can barely keep my hands off you. Sell that, and everything else follows. Right. Madly in love. Simple. His smile was quick, almost genuine. You'll be perfect. I have complete faith in you. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like more weight added to shoulders already buckling. The plaza's ballroom had been transformed into something from a fantasy, all gold and crystal and flowers that probably cost more than most people's cars. Guests in formal wear clustered in groups, champagne flutes glittering like props. Alyssa recognized faces from the photographs, from news coverage, from the research she'd done, and they all turned when Thomas and Alyssa entered. The scrutiny was immediate and intense. Conversations paused, eyes assessed, judgments formed. Thomas's hand found the small of her back, steady and grounding. Breathe, he murmured, and smile. You're the happiest woman in the room. Alyssa smiled, channeling every theater class she'd taken in college, every client presentation she'd nailed despite nerves. She was Alyssa D'Angelo tonight, deeply in love, completely confident, unbothered by the stares. Marco appeared first, Sophia at his side, his wheelchair pushed by the same guards from yesterday. Thomas, and the beautiful bride. You look radiant, my dear. Thank you, Marco. The name felt strange on her tongue, too familiar, but he'd insisted yesterday she call him by his first name. Come, let me introduce you to some people who matter. Marco's smile was benevolent, but Alyssa caught the calculation behind it. This was a test, presenting her to his world, seeing how she performed. The next hour was a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Business associates whose legitimate fronts barely concealed criminal enterprises. Politicians who smiled too widely and accepted envelopes too smoothly. Society wives who assessed Alyssa like competition, their smiles sharp as knives. Through it all, Thomas remained at her side, his hand occasionally finding hers, his presence a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in this performance. They moved through the crowd like dancers, practiced and synchronized, selling the illusion of devotion with every glance and touch. "You're doing brilliantly," Thomas whispered during a lull. "Everyone's buying it. Or they're just being polite. In this crowd, there's no such thing as polite. Trust me, you're killing it." Then Franco Versani materialized from the crowd, his smile predatory. "Thomas, and this must be the mystery woman who stole your heart. I heard about your whirlwind romance. How romantic." Up close, Franco was exactly as Isabella had described. Handsome in a dangerous way, his charm calculated and cold. He took Alyssa's hand, holding it too long, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a way that made her skin crawl. "Franco," Thomas said, his voice carrying warning, "may I present my wife, Alyssa?" "Alyssa? What a lovely name." Franco's eyes were calculating, searching. "Tell me, how does an architect from public school end up marrying into the Castellano family? It's quite the leap." The insult was delivered with a smile, wrapped in false curiosity. Alyssa channeled Isabella's training, keeping her expression bored, vaguely amused. "Love doesn't check resumes, Franco. Though I understand that might be a foreign concept for someone who approaches relationships as business transactions." The nearby conversations quieted. Someone laughed. Franco's smile tightened. "Touché! A woman with spine. How refreshing." He released her hand finally. "And the speed of the marriage? No long engagement? No big wedding? One might almost think you were in a hurry." "One might also think we simply didn't want to wait to start our lives together," Alyssa replied smoothly. "When you know, you know. Unless you're the type who needs years of deliberation for every decision." Thomas's hand squeezed her waist gently. Approval or warning, she couldn't tell. Franco laughed, but the sound held no warmth. "I like her, Thomas. She's got fire. Let's hope she doesn't get burned." He drifted away, leaving tension in his wake. "Nicely done," Thomas murmured. "But we've made an enemy." "I thought he already was one." "True, but now it's personal." Lucia Santoro approached next, exactly as Isabella had predicted. She was beautiful in a severe way, her smile warm, but her eyes cold. "Alyssa, darling, I had to meet the woman who finally tamed Thomas D'Angelo. Come, let's get champagne and you can tell me everything." "I should stay with Thomas." "Nonsense, let the men talk business. We'll have girl talk." Lucia linked arms with her, steering her away before Alyssa could protest. They ended up near the bar, champagne flutes in hand, surrounded by other women who circled like well-dressed sharks. Lucia's questions came fast, disguised as friendly interest. How they'd met. When Alyssa had known Thomas was the one, whether she was intimidated by his family connections. Alyssa deflected with the skill Isabella had drilled into her, answering just enough to seem forthcoming without revealing anything of substance. Around them, the other women listened, occasionally interjecting with comments that felt like small tests. "And your ex-fiancé," Lucia said, her tone sympathetic. "That must have been devastating being left so publicly. How did you cope?" The question was a trap, designed to make her seem weak or vindictive. Alyssa sipped her champagne, considering her response. "I was hurt, briefly. Then I realized Cameron had done me a favor. He showed me what I didn't want, which made it easier to recognize what I did want when Thomas came along." How philosophical. Lucia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And Thomas's business interests? They don't concern you?" "Should they?" Some wives prefer not to know details. Others want full transparency. "I'm curious which type you are." "I'm the type who trusts my husband to handle his affairs while I handle mine. We respect each other's autonomy." Alyssa met Lucia's gaze steadily. "Architecture is my passion. I have no interest in interfering with Thomas's work, just as he doesn't interfere with mine." How modern, one of the other women murmured, though whether in approval or judgment, Alyssa couldn't tell. The conversation continued, each question a small probe for weakness, each answer a delicate dance between revealing too much and too little. Alyssa's face hurt from smiling, her feet ached in the heels, and she wanted nothing more than to escape to the penthouse and sleep for a week. But she held her ground, channeling the woman she was pretending to be. Confident, unbothered, completely secure in her place at Thomas's side. Finally, Thomas materialized at her elbow. Ladies, forgive me for stealing my wife, but they're starting the auction and I want her beside me. Relief flooded through Alyssa as he led her away from Lucia's group. Thank you. You were handling them perfectly, but you looked like you needed rescuing. His hand was warm against her back. Lucia. Exactly as Isabella warned, friendly questions hiding interrogation. And you didn't break. Well done. They found their table and Thomas pulled out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy. The worst is over. Now we just need to survive the auction and the dancing. Dancing? First dance traditionally goes to the newest couple. Marco insisted. Thomas's expression was apologetic. 1 dance, 3 minutes, then we can leave. The auction was surreal, watching people bid hundreds of thousands on art and jewelry and vacation packages, the money flowing like water toward various charities that were probably fronts for something else entirely. Alyssa clapped politely, smiled at the right moments, and tried not to think about how much wealth was in this room, how much power, how much blood probably stained the money being thrown around so casually. Then the music started, and Thomas stood, offering his hand. Shall we? The dance floor cleared for them, every eye in the room watching as Thomas led her to the center. His hand settled at her waist, hers on his shoulder, and they began to move to the orchestra's rendition of something classical and romantic. Look at me, Thomas murmured. Not at them. Just me. Alyssa focused on his face, on the way he moved with surprising grace for such a large man, on the warmth of his hand through the silk of her dress. Up close like this, she noticed things she'd missed before. The slight scar above his left eyebrow, the gold flecks in his dark eyes, the way his jaw tensed when he was thinking. You're staring, he said, echoing her words from earlier. You're leading. I have to look somewhere. Fair enough. They turned, the dress fanning out around her legs. Thank you for tonight. I know it wasn't easy. You're paying me quite a lot of money. Technically, you don't need to thank me. Technically, he agreed, but I'm doing it anyway. The song swelled and Thomas spun her out and back, the movement fluid and practiced. For a moment, Alyssa forgot they were being watched, forgot this was performance. For 3 minutes, she was just a woman dancing with a handsome man at a beautiful party. Then the music ended, applause broke out, and reality crashed back. Can we leave now? She asked quietly. Yes, we've made our appearance. Anything more would be showing off. Thomas led her off the floor, stopping to say goodbyes to Marco and Sophia, accepting congratulations from people whose names Alyssa had already forgotten. The car ride home was silent, both of them drained. Alyssa leaned her head against the window, watching the city blur past, feeling the evening's performance finally settling into her bones. You exceeded every expectation, Thomas said as they pulled up to their building. Franco tried to rattle you and you didn't flinch. Lucia tried to trap you and you deflected perfectly. Even Marco was impressed, and he's not easily impressed. I'm exhausted. That's the adrenaline crash. It'll pass. He walked her to her penthouse door, a strange parody of a normal date ending. Get some rest. You've earned it. Alyssa unlocked the door, then turned back. Thomas? Why me? Really? You could have found someone who already knew this world, who wouldn't have needed all this training. Why approach a stranger with baggage and zero experience? He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Because you were hungry enough to say yes, but smart enough to be careful. Because you had something to prove and nothing to lose. And because, he paused, because when I saw you at Bellacore, I saw someone who was done being underestimated. I know what that looks like. I've been that person. The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. You? The Thomas D'Angelo who everyone fears? You've been underestimated? My whole childhood. Marco's nephew, always in his shadow, People assuming I'd amount to nothing without his name. I had to prove myself every day, earn my place in the family business through blood and work, while everyone else coasted on legacy. His smile was bitter. So yes, I know what it's like to be the person everyone overlooks, to have potential everyone dismisses. I saw that in you. That's why. Alyssa absorbed this, seeing him differently. Not just the dangerous mobster or the calculating businessman, but someone who understood being invisible, being told you weren't enough. Thank you for the honesty, she said finally. Thank you for surviving tonight. Sleep well, Alyssa. He left before she could respond, disappearing into the elevator. Alyssa entered the penthouse, closed the door, and finally let herself collapse. The dress puddled around her on the floor as she stepped out of it, the heels kicked off with relief. She called Rachel as promised, recounting the evening's highlights while scrubbing off makeup and changing into pajamas. You survived a mob party, Rachel said when she'd finished. I'm honestly impressed. Also terrified for you, but impressed. I can't believe I actually did it. I insulted Franco Versani to his face. You what? He was testing me. Isabella said to stay bored, so I got bored and insulting. Thomas seemed to think it went well. Alyssa, you realize you're playing games with actual criminals, right? These aren't corporate lawyers. These are people who make problems disappear permanently. I know. And she did know, intellectually. But tonight had felt like theater, like a performance where the stakes were fabricated. The reality of the danger hadn't quite penetrated yet. Rachel, I think I might actually be able to do this year-long arrangement. I think I can survive it. Surviving isn't the same as winning. No, but it's better than losing. They talked until Rachel's yawns became too frequent to ignore, then said their goodnights. Alyssa lay in bed, exhaustion pulling at her, but sleep was still distant. Her phone buzzed. Thomas. You were magnificent tonight, truly. Sleep well. She stared at the message, then typed back. Thank you. For everything today, and for the honesty earlier. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, the honesty was easy, you've earned it. Good night, Alyssa. She fell asleep with her phone still in her hand, the city lights filtering through the curtains, the weight of the wedding ring foreign but somehow comforting on her finger. Tomorrow she'd wake up and the reality would set in. Tonight, she'd survived her first real test in Thomas's world. And against all odds, she'd actually succeeded. The weeks that followed the gala settled into an unexpected rhythm. Alyssa found herself navigating 2 worlds simultaneously. Her daytime life as an architect at Morrison and Associates, where whispers about her sudden marriage followed her through hallways, and her evenings as Thomas D'Angelo's wife, attending dinners and events where smiles concealed knives and every conversation was a chess match. Cameron had been noticeably absent from the office since her return, supposedly on assignment with Senator Morrison in Washington. Alyssa suspected he was avoiding her, which suited her fine. The file Thomas had given her sat in her safe, unopened for weeks. Revenge, she was learning, required patience. Timing. The right moment to strike for maximum impact. That moment came on a Tuesday morning in early December, 6 weeks after the gala. Alyssa was reviewing blueprints when her phone buzzed with a news alert. Senator Morrison announces congressional run, names Cameron Westbrook as campaign manager. There it was. Cameron's moment of triumph, his trajectory toward real power. The announcement would be official tonight at a press conference, followed by a celebration at the Metropolitan Club, where all of Morrison's donors and supporters would gather. Alyssa opened the file, studying the financial records and emails one more time. Then she made 2 calls. The first to an investigative journalist at the Herald who'd been sniffing around Morrison's campaign finances for months. The second to Thomas. I'm ready, she said when he answered. Tonight. I want to release everything tonight. During his celebration, Thomas's approval was audible. Ruthless. I like it. Send me what you want released. I'll make sure it reaches the right people at exactly the right time. I want to be there when it happens. At the Metropolitan Club, I want to watch. Silence on the line, then, that's dangerous. Cameron will know it was you. Good. Let him know. Let him feel what I felt at Bellacourt. Alyssa's voice was steady, cold. Can you get us in? I can get us anywhere. I'll pick you up at 7. The press conference that afternoon was everything Cameron had probably dreamed of. He stood beside Senator Morrison, looking polished and confident, fielding questions about strategy and vision with practiced ease. Victoria was there too, beautiful and poised at his side, the perfect political partner. Alyssa watched it on the office television with her colleagues, accepting their uncomfortable congratulations on her own recent marriage, deflecting questions about Thomas with the ease Isabella had taught her. Inside, she felt nothing but cold anticipation. At 6, she left early, heading home to change. The dress she selected was black, elegant, severe. Wore paint, she thought, applying makeup with precision. She was going into battle tonight, and she intended to win. Thomas arrived exactly at 7, taking in her appearance with a slight smile. "You look like an executioner." "That's the idea." The Metropolitan Club was already crowded when they arrived, the city's political elite celebrating Morrison's announcement and Cameron's ascension. Alyssa felt eyes turn toward them as they entered, felt the weight of recognition and curiosity. Thomas D'Angelo didn't usually attend political events. His presence here would be noted, analyzed. "Ready?" Thomas murmured, his hand at her back. "Absolutely." They moved through the crowd, Thomas greeting acquaintances while Alyssa scanned for Cameron. She found him near the bar, surrounded by donors, his laugh carrying across the room. Victoria was attached to his arm, radiant in her success. At exactly 7:30, Thomas's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then at Alyssa. "It's done. The Herald just published their exposé online. Should hit the wire services in the next few minutes." Alyssa's heart hammered, but her face remained calm. They watched as phones throughout the room began buzzing, as people stepped away to read messages, as the energy in the space slowly shifted from celebration to confusion. Cameron's face was visible across the room when he read whatever someone had just sent him. The color drained from his features, his expression transforming from confident to panicked in seconds. He grabbed his own phone, scrolling frantically, while Victoria leaned in to see what had caused his reaction. The Herald's headline was devastating. "Morrison campaign manager diverted donor funds to personal accounts. Emails reveal months-long affair while engaged." The article detailed everything. The financial improprieties, the emails between Cameron and Victoria discussing Alyssa's unsuitability for political life, the timeline proving their relationship had begun months before Cameron's public breakup. Photographs, bank statements, everything carefully documented and impossible to deny. Senator Morrison appeared at Cameron's side, his face thunderous. The conversation was brief and clearly furious, Morrison's gestures sharp with anger. Victoria was trying to explain something, her poise cracking. And Cameron looked like a man watching his future disintegrate in real time. "He's looking for you," Thomas observed quietly. "He knows." Indeed, Cameron's eyes had found her across the room. The recognition in his face transformed immediately to rage. He started moving toward them, Victoria trying to hold him back, but he shook her off. "You," Cameron snarled when he reached them, ignoring the people watching. "You did this. You vindictive—" "Careful," Thomas said softly, stepping slightly in front of Alyssa. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. "You're in public, Westbrook, and you're speaking to my wife." "Your wife?" Cameron laughed bitterly. "Is that what this is? You marry some criminal to get revenge on me? How pathetic." "More pathetic than stealing campaign funds?" Alyssa asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "More pathetic than planning your fiancé's public humiliation like a campaign event? Tell me, Cameron, how does it feel, standing here while everyone watches your world end?" His hand moved like he might actually hit her, but Thomas caught his wrist in an iron grip. "Don't," Thomas said quietly. "Don't even think about it." Security was already moving toward them, along with Senator Morrison, who looked ready to commit murder himself. "Get him out of here," Morrison ordered the guards, "and issue a statement. As of this moment, Cameron Westbrook is terminated from this campaign and any association with my office." "Senator, please," Cameron started, but Morrison turned away, dismissing him with the finality of a door slamming shut. Victoria appeared at Cameron's side, her perfect composure shattered. "This is your fault," she hissed at Alyssa. "You couldn't just move on like a normal person? You had to destroy everything?" "I didn't destroy anything," Alyssa replied calmly. Cameron destroyed himself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Security escorted Cameron and Victoria out, their exit watched by 200 people who would be discussing this scandal for months. Alyssa stood beside Thomas, watching them go, feeling something that should have been triumph but felt more like emptiness. How does it feel? Thomas asked quietly. Hollow, she admitted. I thought I'd feel satisfied, vindicated, but mostly I just feel tired. That's normal. Revenge rarely delivers what we think it will. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. Come on, let's get out of here. You've made your point. They left the Metropolitan Club to a fresh flurry of whispers, drove home in silence. Back at the penthouse, Alyssa kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Thomas poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing her one. To successful campaigns, he said dryly. To consequences, Alyssa countered. They drank in comfortable silence. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, Thomas had become less of a stranger, more of an actual partner in this strange arrangement. They'd fallen into patterns, learned each other's rhythms. He worked late into the night, she rose early to draw. They met for coffee sometimes in the mornings, discussing the day's schedules, the week's events. It was domestic in a way neither had anticipated. What happens now? Alyssa asked. With Cameron? He's finished in politics. Morrison won't touch him, and that scandal will follow him everywhere. Victoria will probably distance herself, protect her own career. He'll end up at some corporate law firm, bitter and diminished. The life he wanted, gone. Good, Alyssa said, but the word felt hollow. Her phone rang. Rachel. I just saw the news. Please tell me that was you. It was me. How do you feel? Honestly, kind of empty. Like I won, but I'm not sure what the prize is. The prize is he doesn't get away with being a complete bastard, Rachel said firmly. You did the right thing, Lice. He deserved this. They talked for a while longer, Rachel's voice grounding her, reminding her why she'd done this. When they hung up, Thomas was watching her thoughtfully. What? Alyssa asked. You're different than you were 6 weeks ago. Stronger, more sure of yourself. I've had good teachers. She met his gaze. This world you live in, it's terrifying and wrong and probably going to get me killed someday, but it's also clarifying. No pretense, no false kindness, just honest transactions and clear consequences. That's a generous interpretation. Maybe, or maybe I'm just getting better at lying to myself. She set her glass down. Thomas, can I ask you something? About us? He tensed slightly. What about us? This arrangement, this contract. It was supposed to be purely business, but somewhere along the way it started feeling like something else, more like, she struggled for words, like an actual partnership. Is that just me? Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. It's not just you, he finally said. I've noticed it too. The ease between us, the comfort. It's unexpected. Unwelcome? I'm not sure yet. He stood, pacing to the windows. I've spent my entire adult life keeping people at a distance. Trust is a liability in my world. Caring about someone gives enemies leverage. But with you, he turned to face her. You know exactly what this is. What I am. There's no illusion to maintain, no performance required when we're alone. It's disarming. In a good way or a bad way? I'm still figuring that out. Alyssa joined him at the windows, looking out over the city they both navigated in such different ways. What happens in 6 months when the contract ends? Do we just shake hands and go our separate ways like none of this happened? That was the plan. Was. Thomas's jaw tightened. Things rarely go according to plan in my experience. Before Alyssa could respond, his phone rang. He answered, his expression shifting immediately to alert. When? A pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, already moving toward the door. I have to go. Business emergency. At 11 at night? My business doesn't keep office hours. He stopped at the door. Stay here tonight. Don't go out. There's been an incident with Franco Versani. Until I know what's happening, I need you safe. Fear spiked through her. What kind of incident? The kind that might spill over into violence. I'll explain when I can. Just please, stay inside. He left before she could argue, and Alyssa was alone with her thoughts and her fears. She tried to sleep but couldn't, instead pacing the penthouse, checking her phone obsessively for updates from Thomas. At 3 a.m., he finally texted, "Safe. Situation contained. We'll explain tomorrow." Alyssa exhaled relief and finally managed to fall into uneasy sleep. The next morning, Thomas appeared at her door looking exhausted, his usually immaculate suit rumpled. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Alyssa stepped aside, letting him enter. "What happened?" "Franco made a move against one of our operations, tried to claim territory that wasn't his. It got messy." Thomas accepted the coffee she poured him. "3 of his men ended up in the hospital. 2 of ours. It could have been worse." "Is this because of me? Because I insulted him at the gala?" "It's because Franco is ambitious and reckless and has been looking for an excuse to challenge my authority for months. You just gave him a convenient narrative." Thomas rubbed his eyes. "Marco called a meeting. Tomorrow night. Franco will be there. We'll need to present a unified front, show him we're not weak. Meaning, I need to play the devoted wife again. Meaning you need to be careful. Franco is dangerous, Alyssa. More dangerous than Cameron ever was. If he thinks targeting you will hurt me, he won't hesitate." The fear was real now, not abstract. "You're saying my life is in danger." "I'm saying I won't let anything happen to you. But yes, you need to be aware of the risks." He set his coffee down. "I can arrange for security. Someone to shadow you, keep you safe." "A bodyguard?" "Thomas, I can't live like that." "You might not have a choice." They argued about it for an hour before compromising on increased building security and Alyssa checking in regularly when she was out. It was a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, but it was something. The meeting with Marco the next night was held at his estate, the same garden where Alyssa had first met him, but this time the atmosphere was tense, dangerous. Franco sat across from Thomas, his expression smug despite the bandages on one of his men standing behind him. "Thomas," Franco said pleasantly, "and the lovely Alyssa. Still married, I see. How domestic." "Franco," Thomas replied evenly, "still making stupid decisions, I see. How predictable." Marco raised a hand before the situation could escalate. "Enough. We're here to resolve this situation, not to trade insults like children." His gaze moved between them. "Franco, you overstepped, deliberately. You knew that territory was under Thomas's protection." "I saw an opportunity," Franco said with a shrug. "In business, we take opportunities." "In family business, we respect boundaries," Marco corrected sharply. "Your ambition is becoming a problem, Franco. One I'm losing patience with." "Perhaps the real problem is Thomas's distraction." Franco's eyes slid to Alyssa. "New wife, new priorities. Maybe he's not as focused as he used to be." "My focus is fine," Thomas said coldly, "as your men in the hospital can attest." "Gentlemen," Sophia appeared with refreshments, her presence calming the testosterone-charged air. "Perhaps we should discuss this rationally, rather than posturing like roosters." The meeting continued for another tense hour, Marco ultimately ruling in Thomas's favor and issuing a warning to Franco about respecting established territories. But as they were leaving, Franco caught Alyssa's arm. "A word of advice, Mrs. D'Angelo," he said quietly. "Be careful. Women in this life, they're fragile things. Accidents happen." Thomas was there instantly, his hand on Franco's wrist. "Touch my wife again and you'll lose that hand. Are we clear?" "Crystal." Franco smiled, backing away. "Just offering friendly advice between family." In the car, Thomas was silent, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I'm sorry I brought you into this world. You were safer when you were just an architect with a broken heart." "Maybe," Alyssa agreed, "but I was also powerless. At least now I know where I stand, what the dangers are. That's better than being blindsided." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, I've made you a target. You've also made me rich, got me revenge on Cameron, and taught me how to navigate rooms full of dangerous people without flinching. That's not nothing." Thomas looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "When did you become so fearless?" when I realized fear was just another kind of powerlessness. And I'm done being powerless. The weeks that followed were tense. Franco made no more overt moves, but the threat lingered like smoke. Alyssa continued her life with new awareness, checking over her shoulder, varying her routines, learning to read rooms for danger the way she'd once read them for architectural potential. And somewhere in that tension, something changed between her and Thomas. The careful distance they'd maintained began to erode. They started having dinner together most nights, not because the contract required it, but because they enjoyed each other's company. They talked about everything, their real lives instead of the performances they gave to the world. Thomas told her about growing up in Marco's shadow, about proving himself through violence and strategy because those were the only currencies his family valued. Alyssa told him about her childhood in Ohio, about parents who loved her but never quite understood her ambitions, about feeling like she was always reaching for something just beyond her grasp. "We're not that different," Thomas observed one night over wine. "Both fighting to be seen by people determined not to see us. Except you won your fight. You're Marco's right hand now. Everyone respects you. They fear me. That's not the same as respect." He swirled his wine. "You want to know something? Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd been born into a different family. Normal parents, normal expectations. Maybe I'd have been an architect too." Alyssa laughed. "Somehow I can't see you drafting blueprints in a cubicle." "No? Why not?" "Because you're built for action, for strategy. You'd be bored in an office inside a week." "Maybe. Or maybe I just never had the chance to find out what I could have been besides this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing his whole life. That's the thing about family legacies. They're prisons disguised as opportunities. It was the most honest he'd ever been with her, and Alyssa felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the dangerous mobster everyone feared or the calculating businessman who'd offered her a contract. This was just Thomas, a man trapped in a life he hadn't chosen, making the best of circumstances he couldn't control. 6 months left on our contract, she said quietly. What happens then? I don't know. His eyes met hers. I used to know exactly what would happen. We'd divorce quietly, you'd take your money, we'd both move on. But now it's complicated. Very. They sat in silence, the admission hanging between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. The crisis with Franco came to a head 3 months later, in March, just weeks before their contract was set to expire. Alyssa was working late at Morrison & Associates when Thomas called, his voice urgent. Where are you? At the office. Why? What's wrong? Franco's making his move. Tonight. I need you to go directly home, use the private elevator, don't talk to anyone. I'm sending security to meet you. Thomas, you're scaring me. Good. Be scared, be careful. And Alyssa? His voice softened. I'll keep you safe. I promise. The security team arrived within minutes, 2 silent men in dark suits who escorted her to a car and drove her home without explanation. At the penthouse, they positioned themselves outside while Alyssa locked herself inside, heart hammering. Thomas called again at midnight. It's over. Franco tried to kill Marco. He failed. Marco's fine, but Franco won't be a problem anymore. Alyssa didn't ask what that meant. She didn't want to know. And you? Are you okay? I'm fine. I'll be home in an hour. We need to talk. He arrived at 2 a.m. And Alyssa had never seen him look so exhausted, so worn. She poured him whiskey without asking, sat beside him on the couch, and waited. Marco wants to retire, Thomas finally said. He's naming me as his successor, officially. The whole family business, all of it, falls to me. That's what you wanted, isn't it? What you've been working toward? Yes. And no. He drank deeply. It means more responsibility, more danger. More enemies like Franco who'll try to take what's mine. It means I can never have a normal life, a normal family. It means anyone close to me becomes a target. Understanding dawned. You're saying I should leave. When the contract ends, I should take my money and disappear. I'm saying you deserve better than this life. Better than looking over your shoulder forever, wondering if today's the day someone uses you to hurt me. Shouldn't I get to decide what I deserve? Thomas looked at her, really looked at her. What are you saying? I'm saying these past 9 months have been the most terrifying, exhilarating, real months of my life. I'm saying somewhere between the fake marriage and the real danger, I started to care about you. Not Thomas D'Angelo the mobster, but Thomas, the man who makes terrible coffee and works too hard and pretends he doesn't have feelings but actually feels everything deeply. Alyssa took a shaky breath. I'm saying when the contract ends in 3 weeks, I don't want to leave. Not unless you want me to. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and fear. You know what you're signing up for? Thomas asked quietly. Really know? I know it's dangerous. I know I'll always be looking over my shoulder. I know normal is off the table forever. She met his gaze steadily. But I also know that when I'm with you, I feel seen in a way I never did with Cameron or anyone else. I feel like an equal partner instead of an accessory. That's worth the risk to me. Thomas set his glass down, his hand reaching for hers. I've spent my whole life keeping people at a distance, not letting anyone get close enough to matter. But you, he shook his head, you matter, Alyssa. Somewhere along the way, you started mattering more than the business, more than the family legacy, more than any of it, and that terrifies me. Good, she said, echoing his words from months ago. Fear keeps you sharp. He laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. Then he kissed her, and it wasn't like their brief courthouse kiss or the performative touches at public events. This was real, urgent, full of 9 months of carefully maintained distance, finally breaking down. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything. The contract, our arrangement, all of it. I know. I'm asking you to marry me again. For real this time, knowing exactly what that means. I know that too, Alyssa smiled. And yes, my answer is yes. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity. Marco officially announced his retirement, naming Thomas as his successor in a ceremony that felt more like a coronation. The family fell in line, some more willingly than others, but Thomas's authority was now absolute. Alyssa quit her job at Morrison and Associates, using her settlement money to start her own architectural firm. Small at first, just her and a draftsman, but it was hers. She specialized in restoration projects, bringing old buildings back to life, finding beauty in broken things. And on a Saturday evening in early April, exactly 1 year after Cameron had destroyed her at Bellecour, Alyssa and Thomas returned to that same restaurant for a private celebration. Marco had arranged it, renting out the entire space for the evening. The room was filled with people they'd grown to care about. Marco and Sophia, Rachel and her new boyfriend Isabella, even some of Thomas's crew who'd become unexpected friends. The tables were decorated simply but elegantly, champagne flowing freely. Thomas stood at the center of the room, Alyssa beside him, and raised his glass. A year ago, my wife and I stood in a courthouse and made a business arrangement. Tonight, I want to make a different kind of promise. He turned to face her fully, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a new ring, different from the one he'd given her from his grandmother's collection. This one was modern, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. Alyssa Price, you terrify me and challenge me and make me want to be better than I am. You walked into my world knowing nothing and conquered it through sheer will and intelligence. You've become my partner in every sense of the word. His voice caught slightly. Will you marry me again? Not for a contract or an arrangement, but because I love you and can't imagine my life without you in it? Alyssa's eyes were wet, her smile trembling. You're asking me to marry a mob boss, stay in constant danger and give up any hope of a normal life? Yes. Then yes. Absolutely yes. The room erupted in applause as Thomas slipped the emerald ring onto her finger beside the wedding band she'd never taken off. He kissed her deeply, not caring who watched, and Alyssa kissed him back with everything she had. Marco appeared beside them, his wheelchair pushed by Sophia, his smile approving. Welcome to the family, my dear, officially this time. Thank you for giving us your blessing, Alyssa said. I didn't give you anything you hadn't already earned. He winked. Besides, Thomas was insufferable before you came along. You've made him almost human. The evening continued with dinner and dancing and toasts. Rachel pulled Alyssa aside at one point, studying her carefully. You're sure about this? Really sure? Because there's no going back from here. I've never been more sure of anything, Alyssa said honestly. I know it sounds crazy. I know it is crazy. But Rachel, I love him. Not the idea of him, not what he can give me, but him. The real person underneath all the danger and the reputation. Then I'm happy for you, terrified, but happy. Rachel hugged her tightly. Just promise me you'll be careful, that you won't take unnecessary risks. I promise. Later, as the party was winding down, Thomas and Alyssa stood at the same spot where he'd first approached her a year ago. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Think you would have said yes if you'd known it would end up here? Thomas asked. End up where? Madly in love with a crime boss running my own business, stronger than I ever imagined I could be? Alyssa leaned against him. Yeah, I think I would have. Even knowing everything, all the danger and the fear and the impossibility of it all, I'd still say yes. No regrets? Only that I didn't insult Franco harder at that first gala. Thomas laughed, the sound full and unguarded. I love you. You know that? Your ridiculous courage and your stubborn refusal to be intimidated and the way you see the world in blueprints and possibilities. I love you too. Even though you make terrible coffee and work too much and have enemies who occasionally try to kill you, occasionally is generous. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city through the restaurant windows. Somewhere out there, Cameron was living a diminished life, his political dreams destroyed. Victoria had left him for a senator from Connecticut, always calculating, always climbing. He'd ended up at a corporate law firm in Philadelphia, exactly as Thomas had predicted, bitter and small and forgotten. The revenge Alyssa had craved so desperately a year ago felt like ancient history now. She'd gotten her justice, but somewhere along the way she'd found something better, purpose, partnership, love. What happens now? She asked Thomas. Now we actually get married, again. Properly this time, with family and celebration and vows we actually mean. And after that? After that, we build a life. Navigate this dangerous world together. Make a home out of chaos. He kissed her temple. The usual impossible things. Sounds perfect. 1 month later, they married for the second time in Marco's garden, surrounded by flowers and family and the people who mattered most. It was small and intimate. Nothing like the courthouse ceremony or the elaborate affair Cameron had probably envisioned. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of broken dreams and built something real from the pieces. Alyssa wore a simple white dress, elegant and understated. Thomas wore the same expression he'd had that first night at Bellecour, like he couldn't quite believe his luck. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about partnership and honesty and facing whatever came next together. When the officiant pronounced them married, they kissed as husband and wife for real this time, and Alyssa felt something settle in her chest. This was home, not the penthouse or the city or the dangerous world they navigated. Just Thomas, solid and real beside her, choosing her every day the way she chose him. The reception lasted into the evening, filled with laughter and music and joy. Marco gave a toast about finding strength in unexpected places. Rachel gave one about friendship surviving even the most insane decisions. And Thomas gave one that made Alyssa cry, talking about second chances and the courage it takes to build something beautiful from ruins. As the sun set over the garden, Alyssa and Thomas slipped away from the party, walking among the flowers hand in hand. They found a quiet bench beneath a flowering tree and sat, watching stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. No regrets? Thomas asked, echoing their conversation from the restaurant. Not a single one, Alyssa said. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. Think of all the time we wasted not knowing each other existed. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. Any earlier and I wouldn't have been ready. You either, probably. Wise words from my brilliant wife. I'm an architect. I understand structure, foundation, the importance of building on solid ground. We needed our foundation first, the contract, the arrangement, the friendship. Now we can build something that lasts. Thomas pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the party continued behind them. Somewhere in the distance, the city hummed with life and danger and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, the ongoing reality of the world they'd chosen. But tonight, they were just two people who'd found love in the most unexpected place, built trust from a business transaction, and transformed a marriage of convenience into something real and lasting and worth fighting for. Alyssa looked down at the emerald ring on her finger, at the wedding band that had started as a prop and become a symbol of actual commitment. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, heartbroken and humiliated at this very location, and the woman she'd become through fire and fear and choice. "Thank you," she said to Thomas. "For what?" "For seeing me that night, for offering me a choice instead of pity, for betting on me when I couldn't bet on myself." "Best investment I ever made," Thomas said, his smile visible in the gathering darkness. "Though I have to admit, the return on investment exceeded all projections." "You're comparing our marriage to a business deal?" "I'm saying sometimes the best things in life start as transactions and become something infinitely more valuable." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Alyssa D'Angelo. Every fierce, brilliant, fearless part of you." "I love you too, Thomas, even the parts that terrify me." "Especially those parts, I hope. Especially those." They sat beneath the stars, two people who'd started as strangers with a contract and become partners, friends, and finally, genuinely, irrevocably in love. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and dangerous and full of promise. But they'd face it together, the architect and the mob boss, building something beautiful from the wreckage of everything that came before. And that, Alyssa thought, was better than any fairy tale, because this was real, earned through courage and choice, and the willingness to risk everything for the possibility of something extraordinary. Behind them, the party continued. Ahead of them, the rest of their lives waited. And in this moment, suspended between past and future, they were exactly where they needed to be. Together.